Sending data. It's every single time with this fucking restream. YouTube is like sending data for like so long. And it means there's a huge delay at the end, so like my closing remarks get cut off every single time. But yeah, we're definitely live
Yeah,
now.
right.
So welcome everybody. Thank you for stopping by. Today I'm joined again with Monhop, and we're going to be doing this Yaron Brook debate on democratic socialism. So hopefully I'll be a little bit nicer to him this time.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And that's kind of, obviously we did a similar thing with Dave Smith where we, did a couple of streams where, super critical and negative about what he was saying and rightfully so. And then did one where we were more pro Dave. So, I obviously came to Zulu with this idea. So I thought maybe it'd be good to do a similar thing for Yaron. Obviously, we were, or you were super critical of him in a couple of his in a couple of previous streams. So I thought, let's do something where we're a bit more positive about, what he has to say. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he should be able to make the case for capitalism quite well. I want to see him making the moral argument primarily. So we shall see how that goes.
Yeah.
Oh, pardon me.
Hi everyone. Due to some audio issues at the outset, we lost the first few seconds of Sam Arnold's presentation. He began simply by stating that he will focus on one core problem with capitalism, namely that capitalism creates a class society. He then says, quote, "A tiny elite owns most of the stuff," unquote.
Capitalism creates a class society, and a tiny elite owns most of the stuff. I mean, he's going into the classic, like, Marxian analysis here. It's the idea, and I really want, particularly, I'd like to see Yaron Brook push him on this, because ultimately what it means is that he thinks that contradictions are true. He thinks that between these classes there are contradictions which actually exist. He really thinks. I mean, this is if he's going for the standard Marxian thing, capitalism creating a class society, it means capitalism is creating contradictions between the proletariats and the capitalists. It's dialectics. The contradiction is the really real thing. It's like I would like to see them get into that depth. Hopefully they do.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think as well, the thing is that Sam is a very, very, very soft variant of socialism. He's not like a Marxist Leninist or really a communist or like definitely like a Maoist or anything. He's a very soft like variety of like democratic socialism that was really popular. Like if you recall around like 2018, 2019 when this debate happened, it was all, we were all big Bernie Sanders and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez types, where like democratic socialism was like the thing, right? So he's a very soft variant. So he'll allude to these Marxist concepts, as you said, of like class society and the labor theory of value and stuff, but he doesn't really accept them wholeheartedly because he doesn't want to advocate for, violent revolution and, dictatorship of the proletariat or anything like that. But at the end of the day, he's still, fundamentally a socialist.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, he's inconsistent if he doesn't advocate a violent revolution. Like, I think any socialist is inconsistent. I mean, that's what socialism used to mean. It used to be like the communists were for a violent revolution and the socialists were for more reform. But even now, the socialists are starting to become for violent revolution. So it's unclear what the distinction ever it could even be. But like, if you're a consistent Marxist, and this is why I would like to see your own kind of dig into this a lot more. Obviously, I mean, we're 2 seconds in right now, but I would like to see your own dig in and show like, hey, you might not want to have this philosophical baggage, but ultimately that's what your system is based on. It's based on all of these philosophical. It's based on this horrible metaphysics which you get from Karl Marx, which he gets from Hegel. It's based on the metaphysics of contradiction. And ultimately, you have to have that. And the reason why, if he really accepts that metaphysics, if he really accepts that that is true, he would have to be for violent revolution, because ultimately the proletariat and the capitalist class have different logics. There's a complete difference between bourgeois logic, which is the logic of Aristotle, and proletarian logic, which says that contradictions are fine. So a proletarian could never, there is no possibility of convincing the bourgeoisie to ever give up the means of production. That you couldn't do that because they have different logic. So what's the only recourse left if there is no rational discourse possible on their premises? Well, you got to have a violent revolution. That's the only possible way.
Yeah, I've got more to say, but I do want to actually get into the debate because, as you said, we're like 2 seconds in. So let's get it rolling, and then I can, I'll jump in when there's an opportunity.
Pick things up there.
This is just an undeniable fact about American capitalism, indeed about all capitalist societies. So here are some facts to back this up. According to the Federal Reserve 2016 Survey of Consumer Finances, the top 10% of our country owns 77% of the country's wealth. Top 10% owns 77% of the pie.
I would like to. I mean, again, I will not apologize at all for pausing on Mr. Socialism here, but I want to tear apart everything he has to say. So I mean, this is just standard Pareto. 10% of your bean plants will produce 77% of your beans. Whoa, there must be some exploitation going on here. It's like, no, it's just that's how bell curves work. Because as you get to the right half of the right tail of the bell curve, sure, there's going to be way fewer people, but it's an exponential. As you get to that right half, they make exponentially more money because they're exponentially better at things. They're exponentially more specialized, and ultimately, these people are creating the wealth. Like, the wealth isn't there. There is no. Oh, this is kind of like a normie capitalist talking point, but it's true. There is no pie just pre-existing in nature, which, like, we can just divvy up however the hell we want, and then, well, we just arbitrarily chose to divvy up that where 10% get 77%. Isn't that unfair? It's like, no, this pie doesn't exist without those 10%. Those 10% created that pie. It isn't just. It's not a fact of nature that you can choose how to deal with however you want.
Yeah, I mean, to spoiler alert, the concept of the pie gets brought up a lot during this debate. Yaron brings it up, and it gets like re-brought up at various times. But yeah, look, I only had one other point to make beyond what you've said, and that's that there's kind of this assumption that socialists make that 10% that, or the 1% or the 0.1% that they refer to that own all the wealth, that's static, that over time, over years and decades, that it's the same top 10% of people that will always have this large portion of the wealth. In reality, that's not what happens. In reality, I don't have the stats to back this up, or the exact numbers to back this up right now, but I'm pretty sure, at least in America, a very significant proportion of the population will at some point be, a top 10% income earner. It may only be for a year or a couple of years where they're at that peak earning capacity, where their career is where they've reached the pinnacle of their career and it's the most important thing. But they will at some point be a high income earner. So the people that are in the upper class of society are actually changing constantly. And this kind of also goes against their class analysis. It's like, look, the people that are rich and the people that are not rich is changing on like a daily basis. Businesses go bankrupt, and suddenly someone who you might have thought was wealthy is no longer wealthy. Someone starts a new business and it becomes hugely successful. All of a sudden, they're a part of the top 10%. So my point being that they'll just point at this statistic that is true at this present moment, and not really, as you said, consider the past as far as consider how the wealth was created, and they won't also consider the future, how the wealth is going to be created going forward, and how the people that currently occupy that higher income or that higher wealth stratosphere may not in the span of months or years.
Exactly.
The bottom 60% owns 3.2%. Just 3.2%, the bottom 60% of the country. According to the New York Times, the richest 1% in our country now own more wealth than the bottom 90%. And according to, from a global perspective, things are, of course, even more unequal. So according to a 2019 report released by Oxfam, globally, the richest 26 people on Earth own as much wealth as the bottom 50%.
I will just note from like a debate strategy perspective, like he's showing how unequal things are. This is so unequal. As you go into the global stage, it's even more unequal. That's not quite enough yet to make an argument. He needs to say, and things being unequal is bad. We need to eliminate inequality. So if he concedes that inequality is fine in some other area, then he has to, show why this is a special type of inequality, which is bad. So we'll see if he is able to establish that or not.
Yeah, one quick point, and this is something that Yaron does bring up, so I won't go too long on it. But I currently have no debt. Luckily, fortunate enough for me, I have zero debt, and I own some assets. I own a car, and I own some, I have savings and stuff. That makes me richer than a very, very significant portion of the population just by myself, because there's a whole bunch of people with debt that have negative net worth. If you have a mortgage, you have negative net worth on paper. So I'm richer, probably richer than on paper than every single mortgage holder in Australia and probably in the United States, because they all would have negative net worth. So my net worth is combined more than like a very significant portion of the population. So this doesn't even really prove anything necessarily, because you can just point to all the people that have a good standard of living, but owe money on a house or a car.
Mm-hmm.
Of humans. So 26 people, the richest 26 people, own as much as the bottom 3.5 billion. Okay, these are just the facts about capitalism. Capitalism is
I bet you those 26 people are super based. Like, that's awesome. They own more money than 3.5 billion? That's cool.
Class society in which a tiny elite owns most of society's productive resources, whereas most people own nothing. Now, inevitably, defenders of capitalism will reply, and this is a reasonable reply, who cares? Who cares about wealth inequality? As long as everybody has enough. Who cares?
Not even as long as everybody has enough. Who cares about wealth inequality? I don't really care if some people don't have enough. That's their business to deal with. That's not the job of the government to then step in and make sure that everybody has enough. So he's not even necessarily attacking the capitalist viewpoint here. He's attacking like a more like moderate type of socialism than him. Like, it's socialists attacking socialists.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'll see in a moment that he wasn't prepared for Yaron to be like a hardcore, he's obviously not an ANCAP, but a hardcore like pro-capitalist, minarchist type guy. I think he was expecting to come up against like a social democrat or like a neoliberal or something, like someone who is well and truly within the mainstream as far as like their views on the role of government. So I think that shows in kind of how his opening statement plays out, where he kind of assumes that Yaron's going to be like, yeah, we need a welfare state, but, I like private property and I like, the market economy or something.
Yeah, he wants to be debating a Sargon of Akkad or something. I don't know if he's necessarily prepared.
Or Destiny.
If some people have more than enough. Indeed, you might even think it's just envy or resentment that motivates socialist complaints. It's like...
Indeed, it is envy. And this is a particular usage of the word envy from Ayn Rand, where she uses envy to mean hatred of the good for being the good. It's not just that you want to have what somebody else wants. There isn't really a proper word for the emotion she's describing. So she just kind of homesteaded the word envy for it. But she's very precise with how she used it. Indeed, all these socialist complaints are motivated by envy. They hate the good because they're the good. I mean, you can see it in his opening statement so far. It's like, oh my God, these 26%, they own so much wealth. They have so much wealth. And this is, we're supposed to go like, whoa, how bad of them. How terrible of them. Rather than looking at the bottom 60% and saying, hey, step it up, guys. It's bad to be poor. That's the bad part. It's not good to be poor. You want to be rich. This is a good thing. If somebody has achieved wealth, really gone out there, and obviously, if they're like some kind of like state actor or something, yeah, there are bad ways to get wealth, but just in general, if somebody is creating so much wealth that they're like multi-billions of dollars, That's a great moral achievement. We should be celebrating these people. But the socialists, they invert this. They celebrate the people who didn't achieve because they didn't achieve. And they condemn the people who did achieve because they achieved. And that is what Ayn Rand calls envy. And I think it's a very appropriate word for it.
Yes, and this is going to be another, like, just trust me, bro moment. But Alex Narasta, the guy who debated Dave Smith on immigration, he put up a study recently on his on Twitter that showed, actually, like, we now have the data to back this up, that malicious envy is the #1 predictor for support for redistributive policies as far as wealth. It's the #1 predictor, ahead of compassion, ahead of any other kind of, psychological justification that you could come up with. This study found that malicious envy was the #1 predictor for a desire for a redistributive, economic policy.
It's very funny. Add Mentos for $10 Australian. Thank you very much. Did I see your ping in Discord about your last stream? Also, why do these rich people have all that money? Whenever you press them on it, they just say extreme luck. Lol. Steve Jobs was just a lucky man. Yeah, indeed. I mean, I've got some pings on Discord. I could go over them later, if you want. But yeah, no, it's exactly right. Like, what is the cause of them having money? Why was Steve Jobs so successful? It's not just, he didn't just luck into it. If it's really, it's like the idea of, well, if it's really just easy, like, this is the kind of attitude they promulgate, that it's easy to just be a landlord or whatever. But if it really is easy, and any idiot can do it, then why don't they do it? If it really is easy to be rich, then just be rich. You can do that. There's nothing stopping you then.
Yeah, exactly.
He also gave another $5 Australian. Thank you very much. It's just a system of mass envy and theft, socialism, presumably. It only works so long as you can steal from those who produce. Indeed, yeah. That's, it's... Socialists have to predate upon the producers. They don't want to create the means of production. They want to seize the means of production. They need to have somebody to create that means of production, and then they go in and seize it. I mean, this is exactly why, you get so much expansionism from, for instance, the Soviet Union. Because once they've seized the means of production, well, there's all more means of production to seize. They need to seize it all. They're not creating the means of production. They only seize it. It's completely a backward system.
This is why, by the way, you should never trust a socialist or a leftist when they say that there's a distinction between personal and private property. You should never trust them when they say that, because what will happen is they'll seize all the private property and they won't have achieved what they wanted to achieve. So they'll create a new justification for why your personal property doesn't count, and we need to seize that as well. That's what will happen to you in a hypothetical, future socialist society that you might live in. They'll come up with a justification at some point when it's necessary to take your personal property as well.
Yeah, it's like being like marched off to the gulag. It's like, well, don't worry, comrade. We're not interested in taking your toothbrush. It's like, okay, well, at this point, I don't really fucking give a shit.
Like, we want to be like the 26 billionaires who own as much as the bottom 3.5 billion or something. But this reply fails. It fails because, first of all, not everybody has enough. Certainly globally, not everybody has enough. Many basic needs are not being met. But even within our own...
Yeah, I mean, even still, like, he's trying to be too broad. He's being like a politician here, where it's like, well, some people might say, like, no, you have to address what Yaron's going to be saying here. Yaron's not going to be saying, well, yes, of course, who cares? But so long as everybody has enough, then I'm fine with it. Yaron's going to be like, no, I don't... Giga chat, moving in. I don't give a shit if everybody has enough or not. I'm a selfish man, and I only want people who are producing to be having enough, okay? Like, or if there are people who are producing are voluntarily exchanging it. Like, it's not going... So him attacking this kind of hypothetical person who's saying, well, so long as there's enough, then it's fine. by saying, well, some people don't have enough. That doesn't actually establish anything on the flow. So he's not moving towards a victory here.
This is why you don't do your opening statement if you don't know what the position is of the other person that you're debating, which you should. But let's say you don't. This is why you don't start your opening statement by making the negative case against the other person's system, unless the debate specifically calls for that. So because the proposition is capitalism versus democratic socialism, so he should be spending his opening statement making the positive case for democratic socialism up front, not making the negative case against capitalism.
Yeah, because I mean, he's going to have, plenty of cross-examination time. He can go in once Yaron has made a positive case and say,
exactly.
Hey, here's why this is false, blah, 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 blah.
Own extremely affluent country. Not everybody has enough.
Exactly.
So here again are just some facts. The UN Special Reporter on Extreme Poverty took a trip to an unexpected location in 2017, not Haiti, not someplace in South America, not someplace in Africa, instead to the United States. And the UN Special Reporter on Extreme Poverty did not like what he saw. He described our situation...
Oh, gee whiz, the UN Special Reporter didn't like what he saw. Oh no, none of this actually establishes anything.
The primacy of the UN Special Reporter's consciousness.
in my opinion, as private splendor...
The guy that determines what we care about.
and public squalor. And he added that the U.S. has the worst poverty in the developed world.
Private splendor, public squalor. That's an interesting turn of phrase there. Indeed, the private owners of capital are often prospering in the United States. So it's this social programs where you have squalor. So let's get rid of those, hey?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, according to the Routledge Handbook of Poverty in the United States, nearly 100 million Americans live either in poverty or near poverty. 100 million Americans. 2.8 million kids live in households earning less than $2 per day.
I think it's worth examining. Why? Why are these people in poverty? Because he just says, well, we just got to take it as a given that these people are in poverty, so therefore something wrong has happened. It's okay, well, what is the wrong thing that happened? Who did the wrong thing? Was it the rich people? No, they did the right thing. They got wealth. They created wealth. They made these poor people's lives immeasurably superior. So it's worth noting that it's the poor people who did the bad thing. That's why they're poor, at least by and large. Sometimes, bad things can happen to a person outside their control. That's terrible when that happens. Maybe a fire destroys their entire house, and then their boss hates them, so he fires them the next day. And sometimes bad things can happen to good people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the kind of chronic poverty, hey, we've got 5 generations of this family. All of them were poor. None of them built up any nest egg in 80 years of life, and it's constant poverty, constant welfare throughout. Well, what caused that? It's not the rich people. It's the poor people. They chose to be poor. They chose to be in poverty. And that's why, the entire continent of Africa is pretty much chronically poor, because the people there, they choose to be poor. There are numerous examples and anecdotes. Anybody who's a Westerner and has gone to Africa understands this. I remember seeing on Twitter a while back, somebody was oh, well, I went down there and they had this tomato harvest every year, but half of the tomatoes would go off. They would rot. It was so wasteful. So what I did was I taught them how to build a platform with plexiglass on top, so they could sun dry all of these tomatoes. And then they could make tomato pesto, and it would be preserved for a lot longer. And so he went away for a few years, and then he came back, and they had torn the entire tomato drying thing apart for scrap, I guess. And they were back to just having their tomato harvest rot. It's that is a conscious effort to be poor. It takes a moral choice in order to choose wealth, and that's what's missing from his analysis here. It's not that it's not the case that every single poor person was just beset by poverty outside of their control.
Yeah, exactly. And well, it begs the question. I wonder how many. Remember when Mr. Beast went around building 100 wells in Africa, and everyone got really mad about that, by the way, for whatever reason. I wonder how many of them still exist. Like how many haven't just been like destroyed for for the parts, like for whatever selfish purpose. It'd be interesting to, especially given that they weren't like privately owned. I'd love to know.
Or even like poison. I mean, one story I heard was that oftentimes, if a charity comes in and builds a well in one village, but not the neighboring village, then the neighboring village, they'll feel envy. They'll get upset that they didn't get the well. So then they'll go over and poison that well, literally poison the well. They'll throw like dead, rotting corpses in there and shit to prevent anybody from being able to use the well. It's if I can't have it, nobody can have it. That's the attitude of a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And there are over 600,000 homeless people in the United States. 44% of them, by the way, work. We could go on. The point is, the capitalists reply, who cares about wealth inequality? As long as everybody has enough, who cares about inequality? And my initial response is, well, hold on, not everybody has enough. So isn't it morally grotesque to allow billionaires to keep their stuff when we have 600,000 homeless people?
Well, no, it's not morally grotesque, because again, you're attacking like a moderate position here. So this is just his entire opening statement thus far has established nothing which can help him.
Right. And the other point, well, also 600,000 people out of a population of 350 million or thereabouts actually is not that very many people to be homeless. And that is homeless in terms of not having like a house that they own or that they rent. A lot of those people still live in like, homeless shelters that they still have a roof over their head. It's actually even a smaller fraction than that of people that actually like sleep rough out on the street. That you would like when people think of homelessness, they think of sleeping on the sidewalk. That's even only a fraction of the homeless population that actually does that.
Yeah, I mean, even like if you just live in your car, that's homeless, technically.
Also, I forgot to mention as well, all those people that do sleep rough could absolutely get into a homeless shelter if they wanted to. A lot of them just choose not to, or they refuse to give up the drugs or whatever that they need to give up in order to get access. There's not a single person pretty much living in the United States that doesn't have access to a shelter to live in purely because no one like they couldn't get one even if they did everything right. There's like a bare minimum requirement. Hey, don't shoot up heroin while you're in here and don't break all the shit that we give you, and then you can get let into a homeless shelter in the United States.
Secondly, and perhaps more deeply, even if everybody did have enough, even if we did get rid of poverty, still wealth inequality would be a problem. This is so for two main reasons, although in the interest of time I might just stick with one. Which make sure he gets extra time too. Yeah. Okay. All right. As a socialist, I want equality, so make sure. All right. I'll go for two problems then. I could go all day about the problems of capitalism, but I'll restrict myself to two. So the first problem, the first reason why wealth inequality as such is a problem, even if we got rid of poverty. This is so obvious that it almost doesn't even need mentioning. But wealth equals power. When you have
okay, this is an interesting line of argument here, because he wants more power to be vested in the government, like literal power. Like, so it's if he thinks that, well, the reason why wealth inequality is so bad is because the wealthy people have more power. But it's like, so then the solution to this is we have this class on top which has ultimate power, and we give them even more power, and then this wealth it's no longer a problem because it's wealth. Ew, too much power in that. We need to give power to people to prevent that. It's kind of just a contradiction.
Right, exactly. You're actually incentivizing the very behavior that you're pointing out as problematic when you create an even stronger signal towards, hey, this institution has a heap of power. Do whatever you can to curry favor with it. Right. The more that the more power you give it, the more you incentivize people to do that. So the actual if you really care about how wealth gives people like political power, then you would want to make the power that they're trying to acquire impotent, right? Make the government impotent so that there's no incentive to curry favor with it.
Yeah.
A tiny class of people, the top 10%, top 1%, top 0.01%, that owns most of the stuff, they're going to...
It's also just kind of interesting, like just this implicit mob mentality they've got. Like he's very insistent on like this is a tiny class of people who are doing this. This is a tiny class of people who are getting this power, but what he wants is a large class of people. Like, why is the bigness of the class? Why does that matter? He wants a large majority of people to be ruling over the minority. Why is that? Why is that a better situation?
Yeah, exactly. It's, if anything, you'd want a small group of, if you're going to have an oppressor, you want that oppressor to be as small of a class as possible, so you have a better chance of getting rid of him, right?
Mm.
Dominate politics, economy, and society. This is not just me making this up. So in 2014, some influential political scientists from Princeton and Northwestern released a really important paper in which they found, quote, ordinary citizens have little to no influence on public policy at all. So who does have influence?
Looks like democracy didn't really work. You might even call it the god that failed. So what's the solution? More democracy, democratic socialism. And then it'll all work out. Like, I mean, the US, it is democratic socialism pretty much already. Like this is happening, and still these things happen where one person in a democracy, of course, is going to have basically no influence. Duh.
Mm.
No surprise. Quote, it is individual economic elites and corporations, which are largely owned and controlled by wealthy elites, that affect public policy. So 2014 academic study finding that ordinary people have literally no influence on public policy, whereas economic elites drive public policy. So the first problem here, people, is that we don't live in a democracy. We live in a plutocracy. In our system, it's wealthy people who run the show, economically and politically. Now, inevitably, capitalist defenders will say, well, who cares?
If it really was wealthy people that just could dictate policy at will, and there's nothing the poors can do about it, well, first of all, then good luck ever getting fucking democratic socialism. Like, it's never going to happen. And like you should be speaking to these rich people and trying to convince them of it. But secondly, if that really was the case, and these are like this like caricature capitalist class where they, are like the fucking pigs in suits and whatnot, why would there be any taxes on corporations? Why would there be any taxes on the wealthy people? Why would any of that happen if these people could really just dictate public policy at will, and they were also this caricature of capitalists? Why would that ever occur? It wouldn't.
Yeah, this is a point that I've made to a lot of socialists over the years when they will, because I obviously, identify myself as a libertarian, and they say, well, libertarianism would just be like corporatist, controlled by the rich hellhole. And I'm like, well, you can't simultaneously believe that and also believe that the government is totally captured by rich elites. Because otherwise, if it is true that the government is captured by wealthy elites, and it is true that libertarianism would result in a society that was totally controlled by, Jeff Bezos and, Elon Musk and stuff, then why aren't all these, why aren't all these rich elites going out and advocating for, like, why aren't they all just banging, Murray Rothbard and the Anatomy of the State and, encouraging people to read that? Why are they, out here not doing that? Why are they advocating for government policy and government regulation? If it really were the case that Rothbardianism would result in, their total control over society, then why are they advocating for it? They're not. The only billionaires that anyone can ever point to that support libertarianism are the Koch brothers. They're like the boogeyman because obviously they spend money on the Cato Institute and whatnot. They're the only ones. Literally every other billionaire on maybe apart from Musk has done a few kind of libertarian things recently, but overall, like, George Soros isn't a fucking libertarian. Jeff Bezos isn't a libertarian. What's his name? Warren Buffett's not a libertarian. These guys aren't out here talking about, Rothbard and Hopper. They're out here talking about why we need to, regulate their competitors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of my students say this when we talk about socialism and capitalism. A lot of my students are conservative at TCU. And they will, at this point, reasonably say, well, you know what? Rich people probably know what they're doing. They didn't get rich by accident. So if anybody's going to be in control, rather the rich than the poor. Well, there are problems with this reply. First, that ain't how democracy...
Well, I mean, even still, like, this is not... He keeps doing this thing of, like, well, let's imagine a counter. But he's bad at imagining counters. Like, this is... like, Yaron isn't going to be coming in. I mean, obviously Yaron is a statist, so... it's not terrible to try this counter. But Yaron isn't going to be coming in. It's like, well, it's better that the rich people rule than anybody else. It's like... Well, no, he's going to think that there should be some sort of objective standard for, government. Like, he doesn't think that the rich should rule the poor or the poor should rule the rich.
Yeah, exactly. It's the classic socialists. You see them on TikTok. They'll construct literally a straw man of a capitalist, and they'll just self ID as a capitalist and present the argument, and then totally own themselves as the socialist. That's essentially what he's doing at the moment.
Democracy works. We didn't sign up for plutocracy. We signed up for democracy. We're supposed to have political equality in this country. We're supposed to share the government.
Well, we didn't.
Yeah.
I don't remember signing the Constitution of Australia. Yeah. I didn't sign up for democracy at all.
Yeah, literally nobody signed up for democracy. It's mob rule.
But again, perhaps more deeply,
apart from John Hancock and Sam Adams and stuff when they signed the Declaration of Independence, the rest of us it all just had it foisted upon us, right?
Mm-hmm. The problem with this reply is that it completely ignores class conflict. Here's the reason why it's a big problem that the rich control everything. The interest.
Yeah, again, class conflict. The interests of the capitalists, presumably, are not the interests of the proletariat. Again, we could dig into this point, and at its root, what that means is that contradictions are true. That literally they have different logics, and that's why their interests are different. And I don't think he's kind of, chatted up, confident enough in his positions to ever explicitly endorse that. I think he'd run away from it.
Yeah, exactly. And he's also just wrong that the interests of the working class and the capital owning class are disaligned. They're actually perfectly aligned. Both of us want to be more productive. Capitalists want us to be more productive because they get more profit out of it. And workers want more productivity because that's how they get higher wages. So, in reality, the productive class has, perfectly aligned incentives. We all want our labour to be more productive.
Yeah, and another $5 Australian from Admetos. Thank you very much. I wonder if Yaron is about to make all of the pro-capitalist arguments he forgot during the anarchist debate. Yeah, well, hopefully. At least on this subject, he should be able to figure out capitalism.
The interests of the rich are not identical to the interests of ordinary people. In fact, they're often deeply conflictual. So one could illustrate this in a million ways, but let me pick almost at random something from the New York Times from this past year. Here's a headline. Koch brothers killing public transit projects.
Yeah, they can go, yeah, it's literally Koch brothers. Whoa, it's the Koch brothers.
Yeah, literally, it's the one guy, the one set of guys that they can come up with who are anti-statist as billionaires. It's like the Koch brothers are every billionaire in America, apparently.
Across the U.S., Nashville was considering spending about $5 billion on a new public transit plan. The Koch brothers poured money into some sort of lobbying group or organization called Americans for Prosperity. Americans for Prosperity descended upon Nashville and convinced enough people to vote against the project to kill.
Whoa, convinced enough? So, is he for democracy or against democracy? The Koch brothers, they use their wealth, sure, to convince people to vote against spending $5 billion. What is the problem here? Is that not just democracy? What is his alternative here? Where it would just make sure that nobody has wealth, so that nobody can convince anybody, and the government can just grow infinitely.
Right, exactly. I had the exact identical point that I was going to make. That, 30 seconds ago in the debate, he was saying how, it's bad that, the rich elites can, enforce policy regardless of public opinion. But then, as it turns out, the way that the rich elites appear to be, influencing, public policy is by encouraging people to vote in their direction. So which is it?
Kill it. Now, you might think the Koch brothers just have an interesting theory of what would be good for the people of Nashville. Maybe, but I think more informative is the fact that a lot of the Koch brothers' concerns are bound up with oil, automobiles, and asphalt. And so I think that's a more plausible explanation for why the Koch brothers.
I mean, why do the Koch brothers keep investing in libertarian institutions? Why, if they have no philosophy, why are they doing any of that? They just love oil. Okay, well that could maybe explain why they might give Alex Epstein some money. But why would they be giving money to the fucking Cato Institute? Like, what does that achieve for their oil interests?
Yeah, exactly.
Are killing the projects. Okay, let me move on to, so thus far I've just been criticizing capitalism, right? It's a problem because we've got wealth inequality, and that's bad. So what's an alternative?
And it's worth noting, that's his argument for wealth inequality being bad only works if there's a democracy. I wonder if it's maybe the god that failed, and that's the problem. So if somebody can come into this debate and just say, well, I reject democracy, suddenly his entire arguments against capitalism, it all falls. He has nothing anymore.
I'm just laughing at the fact that, where there's all these billionaires that own, all the means of production, and they're all influencing public policy. And then also, apparently, the only billionaires in the United States are the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
And they're the only ones that, advocate for specific public policies.
Alternative is democratic socialism. This can sound scary and a little unfamiliar, but I think really it's quite simple. So I'm going to explain this in 2 quick steps. First, just start with what economists call the Nordic model, or social democracy. Countries like Sweden and Finland, Denmark. These countries are market economies with regular profit-seeking firms, but they have high rates of unionization, they have very high levels of taxation, and they have very high level of social spending that goes to fund universal social benefits.
Well, it's the question of why even keep the profit-seeking firms then? Like, is this guy going to go, wow, we need to solve the ECP somehow? Like, because if he doesn't have the ECP point, then why stop? Why not just have the government control everything? Because then it'll be maximally equal. Because any wealth inequality is bad, Mr. Sam Arnold. Didn't you hear? Any wealth inequality is bad, so we got to equalize it completely, or else the wealthy are going to have political power, and this is bad.
Yeah, and this will come up a lot, so I'll be quick here, but worth remembering that the Nordic model is absolutely not remotely socialist in any way, shape, or form, as by what the standard that this person would consider socialist. We would consider it socialist because they have a lot of wealth redistribution, because our perspective is any involvement by the government is socialist. But from his standard, in many ways, the Nordic model actually would move the United States further away from socialism, specifically in as far as regulation of the private sector. There's actually a lot less of it in the Nordic countries than there is in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Benefits that goes to everybody. So universal healthcare, universal higher education, etc. Now, I think this would be a gigantic improvement of what we have now. And quite honestly, if we just move to, say, Sweden, move our country towards Sweden, I'd be happy. But socialists want to go even further, because the problem with countries like Sweden is, although they're more egalitarian, there still is a capitalist class that owns most of the wealth. So the solution from the socialist perspective is to replace private ownership of productive assets with collective democratic social ownership.
Well then, okay, so he was like, well, they say what these profit-seeking firms just try and ease you into it. But then he's like, well, it's still not there, because the real socialist solution would be collective democratic social ownership of the means of production. So ECP, good luck, buddy.
Yeah. Also, I love, as you said, he eases you into it by saying, oh, Nordic model, where there's still private ownership, very significant private ownership. And then the one small baby step is just totally restructuring the entire economy and totally taking over all of the private ownership in exchange for public, state ownership. It's that's a bit more than just a one little baby step, right? It's actually a pretty significant step.
Mm-hmm.
Of productive assets. This is, it can be difficult to see how to implement this in practice. Maybe I don't want to take any more time, so maybe in my next time I'll say more about it. Sorry for going over. Okay, great. So to be continued. Thank you.
Overall, just a dreadful, terrible, no good opening statement. He really didn't do any groundwork to establish, because obviously, I mean, if your own was just a basic bitch like Republican, maybe that could work. But obviously, anybody who's aware of Yaron Brook's position knows that this has done nothing to establish anything which could stand against Yaron Brook. I'm very much looking forward to seeing Yaron kind of tear into this.
Okay, so I think the way we're going to do this is I won't comment as much on the comments, and then what we're going to do rebuttals, 5-minute rebuttals, where I'll comment more on my disagreement with pretty much everything you've just heard. But that's okay. He's going to disagree with everything I'm going to say, so we're doing this in a friendly disagreement, but fundamental disagreement.
I just want to say right off the bat, it's very hilarious how Yaron Brook versus Łukasz Dominiak, any sort of anarcho-capitalist, it's like, this is not even debatable. This is terrible. My arm was twisted and I was forced into this. Blah, blah, blah. But Yaron Brook versus Democratic Socialists, well, we're doing this in the spirit of friendly disagreement. This is perfectly like what the fuck?
I actually recall him being on Lex Friedman's podcast with Michael Malice, and him actually having the opposite criticism, where he was apparently he was in like a Reason green room with some libertarians, and then some communist guy walks in, and like the libertarians didn't really, just kind of said, like the communist is a nice guy. Like they didn't really take him to task over being a communist. And he was like, how dare you? You should be, anytime you see a communist, you should be ripping them to shreds for believing in communism. This is so evil. And then, but now he's the one that is like really aggressive towards the libertarians for, somewhat in the grand scheme of, the totality of political ideology, the relatively small disagreements that, us and Yaron would have from an outsider standpoint. And yeah, as you said, like he's, friendly towards this guy that wants to, totally abolish private property. Just very, very weird.
Yeah, Zoran Mamdani, great guy. Fucking Murray Rothbard, kill him.
So the first thing I want to do, which I think is always important in a debate or in a presentation generally, is define terms. I think it's important to define your terms. Because one of the things I find when I debate people on socialists or the various categories of socialists is that they never define capitalism. And what they do is they assume the world as it is today is capitalist, and therefore all the ills of the world today are blamed on capitalism. So
I think this is a good strategy to, obviously, he's making the positive case, but he's also, at the same time as he's making the positive case for capitalism, he's kind of just negating everything that Sam Arnold said in his opening statement, because Sam Arnold was all assuming that a certain thing was capitalism when it wasn't. So if Yaron just comes in and asserts, because obviously Yaron has the prerogative to say what capitalism is, because he's the one making that argument. So Yaron can just come in and assert what capitalism is, completely counter to what Sam Arnold is saying, and then his entire opening statement is just nullified.
Right, exactly. He's nullified, as you said, Sam's entire opening stanza, where, as you said, he makes this entire presumption that the world as it is today is capitalist, and Yaron is going to have to set out and defend everything that's going on in the United States. And Yaron just comes out and says, no, not really, because it's not really capitalist, and it's not really what I'm actually going to defend. So, yeah, it is a very, very effective, just obviously not only correct position, but just effective as far as the debate tactic is concerned.
3.5 billion people around the world are truly unbelievably poor. They're so poor that their net worth is negative. So indeed, I'm probably richer than like a billion of them. Just me alone. And I'm not a billionaire. Just me alone, because they have negative net worth. And when you add negative numbers, what do you get? A big negative number. So it's easy to be richer than a lot of negatives. But are they living under capitalism? Is the real question we should ask ourselves. And clearly they're not. Like, people in Africa are not living in capitalism. People in Asia are not living in capitalism. Indeed, I would argue, and will argue vehemently today, that we in America don't live under capitalism. And there is no country in the world today that is a capitalist country. Capitalism does not exist in the world today. What we have is lots of countries that are mixed, a mixture of socialism and capitalism, socialism being statism, the state involvement, heavy state redistribution of wealth, and some property rights that are regulated, controlled by the state, are not true property rights, because I can't actually do what I want with my property. I have to get permission for almost everything that I do with my property. I used to live in California, that was the case. You need to get a permit to chop down a tree, you need to get a permit to redo your house, you need to get a permit for everything. That is socialism or statism, some form of statism. It certainly is not capitalism. So what is capitalism?
I mean, again, absolutely correct strategy. Bad Mentos is given $5. Thank you very much. That's like a lot of money at this point. Summary, look at those rich people. Don't you want some of their money? Look how much money they have. And it's not fair. Indeed, yeah. That's basically Sam Arnold's entire argument is, well, isn't this just so unfair? It's like, well, if you reject the fairness lens, and you don't care about fairness in law, then it completely destroys it, which obviously that's tied into the whole objectivist loving of selfishness. That's the opposite of fairness.
Yeah, exactly. And shout out to Ed Meadows, man. He makes it rain whenever he's in the stream. So shout out.
Yeah.
So the definition of capitalism is a system of real free markets, where the state does not intervene in the economy, does not intervene at all. That is, capitalism is a system in which there's a separation of state from economics. in which the state does not intervene in economics at all.
Well, unless it's the economics of private production of defense, then they can intervene. Again, I don't want to be too mean to Yaron here, but I think he kind of calls it on himself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, he's just someone that hasn't been willing to take his position to it. It's absolute logical conclusion and stop short, much like Rand did for, no particular justifiable reason.
Mm.
So I agree, cronyism is bad. Having a lot of money, therefore gaining political power, is bad. And indeed, the only way to prevent that and still be a little free, still be free at all, is by restricting the ability of the politician to have any influence on the economy, and therefore there's never any reason to lobby the politician because he has no influence on the economy. He has no way of gaining favors or penalizing the competition because that is banned. So capitalism is...
Well, it's banned. This is a no-gun zone. They banned it, and they wrote a constitution, and it said, these are the rules. The rules say you're not allowed to interfere in the economy. I don't know, fucking shall not be infringed, and then they infringe on it. I just love this kind of rules lawyering, where it's like, well, it's banned. They banned it. So, well, I guess it's not going to happen anymore.
It says right here in this document, you're not allowed to do that.
It's like the fucking, there's this like smoky room of like backdoor dealings. It's the big businessmen are bribing some politicians, and quickly somebody's like running down the hallway with like papers in their hands. It's getting closer to the politician stamping the rubber stamp on like the put a big, Mr. Burns' plan of like blocking at the sun or whatever. He's about to do it. And then they burst through the door. It's like, well, stop, sir. Don't you know? The rules say no. It's like, oh, fuck. Everybody just goes, geez, I didn't realize. Oh, my God. I guess we got to stop. Pack it up, gentlemen. I never realized this.
It's like that joke where like someone, if you're getting mugged, just remember, rest assured, it's all okay because the mugger actually illegally isn't allowed to mug you. So just rest assured, it's all going to be okay. They're not going to mug you because legally they can't do that.
This is a system in which economy and politics are separated, in which all property is private property, in which the state does one thing and one thing only, and that's protect individual rights. Protect individual rights in the way somebody like John Locke would have conceived of individual rights. That is, the freedoms, freedom from coercion, the freedom to do, act, produce, live by your own judgment, based on your own ideals. And the only job of government is to protect you, make it possible for you to do that, and protect you from whom? Or from other people. Because when we live in a society, there can be some people who are crooks, frauds, criminals, bad guys. And since we don't want to live in a society, at least I don't, there might be some anarchists in the room, but hopefully not. Since I don't want to be carrying all the time to watch myself, we institute a government, an institution, whose sole responsibility it is. It's to defend each one of our lives, to defend our liberty, to defend our property, because property is essential for life, and to protect our ability to pursue our own happiness. But basically, to leave us free as individuals, to pursue the values that we believe are necessary for our own survival, that we believe are necessary for our own life, to leave us alone. Right? So capitalism is a system where individuals pursue their individual values, their individual happiness, free of coercion, and the job of the government is to make sure that they are free. That's it. That's what capitalism is. I don't see it in America. I don't see it anywhere, indeed,
I will
in the
just
world.
say real quick, it doesn't matter too much for this debate because Sam is a socialist and so not very intelligent. But it does crop up a couple of times where this is the problem with what some people like Yaron will do, where they'll define their just society in terms of like how free it makes people. And this is nice, like in kind of a general sense, but the problem is that a lot of socialists will just redefine freedom in their own terms and be like, well, if you don't have access to, a certain amount of resources, if a certain amount of resources aren't given to you, then how free really are you? Like you should be free to, pursue your own interests and, do all this stuff. But in order to be free, you have to have access to, you need to have these basic resources given to you. So they'll actually use the concept of freedom to justify wealth redistribution because, how is it fair that some people aren't free to, pursue their own hobbies and stuff because they have to work in order to gain a living? So this does crop up briefly. It's not a huge issue for Yaron, but this is why it's sometimes bad, or it is bad, in my opinion, to when you're debating from a libertarian or from an objectivist standpoint, to use terms like freedom and coercion because they're so ill-defined and people can use them to actually justify socialism or any other kind of brand of statism.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's why it's so important to have like really, really precise terminology. And that's why I'm very particular with the terms I use. I only ever use conflict in the same way. I only ever use aggression in the same way. I never stray outside of these terms, because it's, if again, as you said, if you start using vague terms like, oh, well, we're against force, well, what the fuck does that goddamn mean? Like, you can take that all the way. Well, we're against force. You could take that all the way to Stalin's political position. I guarantee you. Like, oh, well, we're against force, but the capitalist class, they're using force against the proletariat. So we need to be able to defend ourselves, but it's not forceful the way we're defending ourselves. We're just re-educating them. So we got to put them in re-education camps, and boom, we're right at Stalin. From we're against force to Stalin. Like, you can take these vague terms and go anywhere you want with them, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also why, terms like coercion, it's like, well, coercion can be used and is used colloquially just to mean, if I try and convince you to do something. It's like if I, coerce you, I really strongly encourage you, maybe with, some underhanded tactics to, do something for me. That's coercive, but, we wouldn't necessarily say it's aggression. We wouldn't necessarily say it's against the NAP to coerce someone in the way that's been defined. So as you said, the importance of being precise and really nailing down what terms mean and how you're using them in every specific context.
Yeah, I think Kinsella's got this article. You won't be able to see it on screen, but I'll send it to you. Where called "The Problem with Coercion," where he goes over, like, well, libertarians aren't actually against coercion. We want to coerce, criminals to stop their criminal acts and whatnot. Like, so, even on, like, a precise definition of coercion, we're not actually against that. So it doesn't actually fit into any sort of legal analysis properly.
And well, I think I've read that essay, because he also talks about, like, the problem of Locke and how he uses terms like, labor mixing and stuff. And it's like, well, that's very, like, ill-defined. Like, what exactly is labor? How exactly does it get mixed into the property? Like, people will take that to mean, like, there's actually, like, some kind of spiritual essence that you've embedded into the property by mixing your labor with it. So this is why we, refer to original appropriation, and we refer to, embordering with, an objective boundary around your property. Because, people will take that to mean this, like, labor mixing thing, that if I pick up a rock and, throw it, well, I've mixed my labor with that rock, so now it's eternally mine. When in reality, like, we wouldn't really define it that way in libertarian terms.
Yeah, and it's like, in the video I'm working on, the Dave Smith video, Dave is very much in the vague terms territory. He has presented, in the video I have him, where he presents two separate theories of libertarianism, where he's like, well, I actually know the libertarian theory, and this is what he gives two separate ones, and both of them are, like, laughably primitive. I'll give a taste of it. One of them is that he thinks, well, the reason why I own things is because if you come and take that thing from me later, like if you built a house and somebody came and took that house from him, well, then he's been retroactively enslaved for the entire time he was building a house. It's like utter nonsense. No, that's not why you own things at all. Retroactive slavery doesn't fucking exist. Do I retroactively enslave a pharaoh if I'm an archaeologist? Because, I mean, the pharaoh, he worked for those jewels that I'm taking. so I've enslaved this long dead man, because it's retroactive. It can be at any point in the past. And it's like, also I show that if you take the standard of retroactive slavery, it actually becomes impossible to have any theory of contracts, because what you were consenting to at the time doesn't matter. Only what you're consenting to right now matters. Okay, so then I could gift a house to a person, and then later I change my mind, so then I've retroactively made it slavery again. It's utter nonsense, and it destroys any basis of libertarianism.
To some extent, I would argue it's never existed. To the same extent, I think the socialist would argue that socialism has never existed in his kind of form. I don't think capitalism has ever existed. I think But will say this. So let me complete the moral argument, and then I'll get to the practical argument. Now, why is this good? Why is the system right? Why is the system just from a moral perspective? Well, what is moral? What is good, evil? What is right versus wrong? Well, the standard for me for determining whether something is moral is it consistent with human survival? Is it consistent?
I think this is Yaron's strong suit in this debate, is that he actually has a fucking philosophy backing up what he's after here. So he's able to give an actual moral defense of capitalism, which is just going to completely trounce, at least based on what I've seen. I don't think Sam Arnold is going to be able to withstand a second of philosophical interrogation of his system. I think Sam Arnold is going to have a very hard time going up against Yaron's moral argument here.
Yeah, exactly. Even as much as we might say that the manner in which he offers that moral argument for capitalism isn't all that strong, like we saw in the Andrew Wilson Dave Smith debate, it doesn't really matter if you have any philosophical justification. That automatically wins you the argument against someone who has no philosophical justification, because all of a sudden you can just say, well, I've established the terms of like philosophical justification, you haven't, therefore on my terms we win every single time. That's what you can do if you're coming up against someone that has no ability to argue in that realm.
Consistent with human flourishing. Is it good for human life? That which is good for human life, that which furthers human life is the good. That which destroys human life, attacks human life, is bad for human life, is evil. That to me is good and evil. That's right and wrong. That's the essence of morality. And it's an individualistic morality. Because what is human life? Human life is your life, my life, each individual. There is no class here. There is no group here. We impose those ideas on people. But as human beings, we're just us. We're just individuals. And as an individual, the values that are good for you, the values that long-term lead to human success and human flourishing are the good, and the things that lead to human failure are the bad. Now, what is the most important thing if you believe in human flourishing, in human success, in human progress? What is the most important value for human beings, for individual human beings? What is it that makes possible success and flourishing as a human being? Well, we don't have time to go into all of it, but please ask about this. It's our human capacity to reason. It's our capacity to think. It's our capacity to know the truth. It's our capacity to integrate the data from reality. It's the capacity to shape reality in order to fit our needs. That's what makes it possible for this human race to survive, because look at you. You're pretty pathetic animals otherwise, right? We're weak, we're slow, we have no fangs, we have no claws. You're not going to survive out there in nature without...
I kind of have, a pet peeve for this type of argument. I obviously understand what they're saying, reason is the fundamental means of survival. But it's not true that humans are a very weak species and we would die out in nature. It's even if we had really cut down levels of intelligence, if we just had enough intelligence to do pack hunting and no more, we would still be very dominant in certain environments. That's why we survived long enough to evolve our reason.
I was literally about to say that. That's the reason why we got to where we are now. Is for most of human history, we were just fundamentally, slightly more intelligent animals that were just at the top of the food chain, but still within kind of the ecosystem, and still had to live within nature and not really transform or manipulate it to the extent that we are able to now, right? Sorry for interrupting you, by the way.
No worries. Because fundamentally, what is the best long-distance running animal in the entire world by far? Human beings. By far, the best long-distance runners. No competition at all. Because human beings, we're able to sweat. So we're able to get rid of excess heat as we run. So yeah, these antelope or whatever, they'll be able to run away from us real fast. We just keep jogging behind them. And then we catch up again. And then the antelope runs away real fast. And then we just keep jogging behind them. Just keep jogging. And, after an entire day of that, the antelope, it's not going to be able to run anymore. And then we just walk up to it and fucking poke it with a spear, and it's dead. That's how humans were able to, even if you don't have a spear, if we're going to be cutting down the level of intelligence of humans, fucking bare hands at that point, just fucking beat the thing to death.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if you dropped a whole bunch, I think they're in front of some college students. So yeah, if you dropped a bunch of modern day college students in the wilderness, they'd probably all die. But that's because they haven't, attuned themselves to that environment and learned how to survive out there.
Capacity to reason, to think, to strategize, to invent, to innovate, to produce. What makes us different than any other animal is we're not programmed to survive. You actually have to figure out how to survive. So the most important thing about being human is our capacity to think. Now, thinking requires freedom. It requires the ability to try stuff out, to fail, to experiment, to do a variety of different things. Knowledge is not just embedded in our minds. We don't know what's right, what'll work, what will succeed. We need to go out there and live and choose and make decisions. And again, fail sometimes and get back on our feet. The most important thing for human intelligence, for human mind, for human beings to flourish is their ability to think freely and to act based on those thoughts within freedom. Free of coercion. Force, authority. Okay, I didn't see that signal. Force, authority are the real enemies of the human mind. They are what limit.
I just love Yaron's, clearly he's got like a vague speech in his mind, because he said the same thing in the last debate I reviewed of his with Łukasz Dominiak, where he's like, well, authority, force, that's the enemy of the human mind. Then when it comes to anarchism, he's like, well, we need authority here. We need a final authority to be the arbiter of last resort. So like he's for authority and against authority.
Yeah, force and authority. I wonder what kind of organization we might be able to come up with that has like the most authority and the most force at its disposal. I wonder.
Ability to produce, create, and really live out there. So you want a system that protects our ability to think and act on our thoughts. That's capitalism. It's a system that eliminates the one enemy of thought, which is violence, fraud, people using guns, people using authority to dictate how you should live and how you should think and what you should do. Think Galileo. Right? Now I'll just end with this. It turns out that when you leave people free, when you let people think, when you take away the authorities, when you take away state control and limitations, to the extent that you do that, and I said there's no ideal capitalist country yet, but there have been attempts to get there, to the extent that you do it.
I just love, just clearly this argument, you can apply equally in the fucking security industry. Like, it is insane. The second you take a Randroid outside of the realm of it's an anarchism versus statism debate, they make all these great capitalist points which apply equally. I mean, again, this is why Murray Rothbard came up with anarcho-capitalism in the first place, is somebody just used it as a reductio ad absurdum to him. It's like, well, if you love the free market so much, then why not have a free market in the police as well? And he's like, hey, that's not such a bad idea.
You're onto something there, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? They end up making really, really good arguments. At the end of the day, this is why Yaron has to strawman the natural law theory of anarcho-capitalism and turn it into the David Friedman polycentrist, polylogist version of quote unquote anarcho-capitalism, because that's the only way he can refute it, and he can refute it correctly because obviously Friedman's kind of conceptualization is very silly, but he can't refute the actual justification for libertarianism, because, as you see, he just has to strawman it and turn it into, the Friedmanite version of it to refute it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it becomes, instead of acentric, polycentric. Instead of one authority, we want many authorities, and it's like, well, gee whiz, I think we're missing an option here.
To the extent that you practice this freedom, to that extent, you produce economic wealth, you produce economic success, you get rid of poverty. To that extent that you practice capitalism, you are successful in bringing about...
This is a very correct point he's making here, that to the extent that the government laissez-faire, that to the extent that they leave alone, the productive people are able to create the wealth, which eliminates poverty. That's absolutely the right way of thinking about it, is that these rich people, they're creating that wealth. Which Sam Arnold, in his opening statement, he was kind of operating on this implicit premise that, well, there's just the wealth is out there, and we can just choose how to distribute it however we want. But that's not true. So it's very good. I like Yaron making that point, and I would like Yaron to explicitly say like, hey, and that's why you're wrong about this sort of fixed pie out there in nature model. Obviously, he's going to have a cross-examination, so maybe he can go into it a bit more. But I very much like this groundwork that he's laying here.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, there was this tweet by this guy, Existential Comics, who's like some socialist. And he's basically trying to make an argument against Pareto distributions being unjust, or making an argument for Pareto distributions being unjust. And he's like, well, under the capitalist paradigm, if you had 100 people on an island with 100 houses, The Pareto distribution would say you should give 20 people 80 of the houses, whereas the socialist position would be that you each give one person a house so they all have a house. The fundamental problem with that hypothetical is that they just like assume that like just these 100 houses just spontaneously come into existence out of nowhere. They're just magically there for people for us to then just arbitrarily distribute according to like some ethical system. It's like, well, what about who produced the house? Why is it there? How was it created? Who gathered the means to build these 100 houses that we now have? And, the capitalist position isn't that you just arbitrarily say, yeah, the top 20% get 80%. That isn't the position. The position is that the person who produced the house is the one that should own it. Or the person that homesteaded it is the one that should own it.
Yeah.
And they should be able to do with it as they see fit. And it just happens to emerge this, Pareto distribution that you get, a small number of people that end up owning a large proportion of the wealth because they're, as you said, exponentially more productive than a lot of other members of society.
Yeah, I do want to shout out the local jester, evolutionary capitalism, utilitarianism. He's come in with another banger. The free market is a contradiction, unlike co-ownership. So, thank you very much for the banger there.
At the end of the day, he's adding another viewer to the live stream and he's adding more comments. So he's boosting the engagement. So, keep it up.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they had a jester at these medieval castles, they got to have somebody to, I don't know, throw tomatoes at, I guess.
Standard of living, rising quality of life, longer life expectancy. In every dimension, you improve human life. And to the extent that you do the opposite, to the extent that you use coercion, that you use force, you use authority to suppress human freedom, primarily the freedom to think and to act on that thought, to that extent, you become poor, to that extent, you suffer, to that extent, life becomes miserable. That's the difference between capitalism and socialism. The one is a system based on individual freedom. The other is based on individual suppression and coercion, and the consequences are obvious. One leads to wealth, and one leads to disastrous poverty. Thank you.
So in terms of definitions, I agree they're important. I'm surprised by.
It's very jarring. I don't like that edit. It's very jarring. Clapping, and then the next second he's just up and talking.
Yeah, just like teleports up and starts talking. He's got special magical powers, magical socialist powers there.
It's like it's a 2 hour and 19-minute video. You can get away with going a little bit, letting him stand up. You can get away with it. You're not going to lose the retention on that.
They actually do this a bit where they just like cut out like the intervening like 3 to 5 seconds. So you're just like, whoa, okay, hang on, you get disorientated for like a split second. You're like, hang on, who's talking now? Like what? Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously if this was like a concise edited down like 10-minute video, you'd want to be cutting out the silence. But let it, people are here for the long run. If they're 20 minutes in to this, they're here for the long run. It's like, okay, you can let them breathe a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
By Yaron, right? Yaron's definition, because as he says,
did he forget his name or something? Yaron, right? Yaron. Did you forget?
By his definition, there are no capitalist countries on Earth. So just notice what an extreme position he's defending. I take it you're defending an economy with no state involvement whatsoever. So
I'm really not liking the direction he's going in. He's kind of appealing to the audience. But I mean, fair enough. You want to convince the audience. He's never going to convince Yaron Brook to become a democratic socialist. Fair enough. But you don't convince the audience by just kind of appealing to them. It's like, oh, audience, look at how extreme he is. It's no. You got to get in there and really tear him to shreds. I suppose, he's defending a ludicrous kind of basic bitch herd in the populist type of stance here. So maybe the strategy is to just ignore the arguments and try and herd people over. But for the libertarians, obviously, libertarians are going to be watching this. Don't do this stuff. You got to get in there and debate them properly, debate them on their terms, show why they're wrong, show why they're in contradiction, and then you reach the remnant. You're going to appeal to only the rational people, because that's what you want. You don't want to be like, oh, so extreme. It's like, because Yaron can just come back and say, indeed, yes, I'm extreme. I am a radical.
Right. Yeah. And to just preempt what he's about to say, and to save you from pausing him like 2 seconds later, basically what he says is that, like, you know, he just wants to make sure people know that Yaron's sharing, like, defending like a super like radical position here, and he set himself a really high bar. He seems to think that being radical and having like a principled stance is like a weakness. It's actually like Yaron's strength in this debate, that he has like a solid foundation and that he's not going to compromise on anything, right? Because if Yaron comes in, let's say that, you know, you replace Yaron with Destiny, or, you know, as you said, like Sargon of the Cat or something, like some like lukewarm neoliberal like social democrat. The problem is with that person, they're going to have to concede a whole bunch of ground to Sam. They're going to have to be like, yeah, I agree. Inequality is a problem. I agree. We need to redistribute wealth more fairly. I agree. The state should play an active role in the economy. They're going to have to concede all this ground and then argue within the margins. The thing is, Yaron gives himself so much room to just reject a whole bunch of Sam. Like, again, he in the first portion of his opening statement, he just rejects the entire foundation of Sam's opening statement by saying, well, we don't live in a capitalist society at the moment. The problem is, with someone like Destiny, he would have had to have conceded that, yeah, the United States is capitalist, and he would have been then saddled with defending all of the different things that, you know, Sam can point out that are bad about the United States. Yaron has actually, yeah, as you said, taken a radical position, and in doing so, given himself strength in the debate rather than weakness. So it's not that Yaron has to clear a higher bar. It's just that he has a more foundational position to take that he can, you know, springboard from and, you know, build a solid foundation based on.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's setting the bar high for you, which I know you know, but I want to make sure they know. So, okay, that's point number one. That's a pretty extreme situation. Well, why? Well, think about all the things that government does. Not in spooky Venezuela, but in USA, baby. All the stuff that the government does right here to promote, I'll use your concept here, freedom, which as a liberal egalitarian, I hold dear to my heart as well.
Am I misremembering? I thought Yaron in his opening statement was already saying, like, no, the United States is not capitalist. So it's like showing that the United States is not capitalist. That's just making Yaron's argument for him. I mean, I don't know. Well, I think he's like some sort of professor. He's not doing, he clearly is not very good at debate, if this is like kind of the strategy he's taking. I'm really very heavily disagreeing with his strategy right now, where he's not established any points that need responding to even. Like, he's just kind of vaguely gesturing. It's like he's doing a lecture right now rather than a debate.
Yeah, as he said, there's no thrust behind his argument to where I have to actually engage with it. I can just say, well, no, I have a philosophical justification for why I don't care about that. And then, he has nothing to say in response, essentially.
Freedom. I think people who defend the sorts of positions you're defending misunderstand freedom. So there's formal freedom, which is freedom from interference, very important. There's also effective freedom, the freedom to actually accomplish things in the world.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you were pointing out earlier, where they can just twist freedom to mean what they want now. And now freedom means when we have socialism. So it's very, that's why you got to have these solid foundations or you crumble.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I was going to make the same point. This is what I was alluding to earlier, where Sam is just able to, reverse engineer a definition of freedom that actually means, well, now we have to accept socialism. If we want freedom, if freedom is the highest value, then we have to accept socialism. So, that's why you should stray away from these vague terms that people, have. Everyone has their own. Everyone is pro freedom, with the exception of like some extreme ideologies. Everyone thinks that their system maximizes freedom. So that's why it's a bad concept or term to appeal to, because everyone is just going to say, well, actually, I promote freedom by, redistributing wealth and giving everyone stuff. That's really freedom. So stray away from that term.
And it is interesting here, though, that really he kind of presented this formal freedom and effective freedom as just different sorts of freedom. It's all under the same banner of freedom. But actually, really, these would have to contradict each other, because formal freedom means being left alone, Okay, an effective freedom means that you're not being left alone. Whoops, so these are actually opposites. So why are they all under the same package of freedom? It's package dealing.
Yeah, so I've made the same point to people who, people will talk about a similar concept, positive versus negative rights, where, negative rights is a right to be, free from something, and then a positive right is a right to something. And I would just point out to them that, positive rights require the violation of negative rights, basically.
Mhm.
So you can't have them both. You can't say, well, people have negative rights and then also positive rights. Because in order to ensure these positive rights, you have to violate someone's negative rights to ensure them. So yeah, basically identical point, just using positive rights versus negative rights versus this formal versus effective freedom concept that he's come up with.
Yeah.
Both are important. Government, it's true, can be a source of interference. It can prevent you from dumping that coal ash in the river that you just really want to dump. You just to live your best life, you want to dump that coal ash, and the pesky government won't let you.
I mean, again. Murray Rothbard, Libertarian Manifesto on Pollution. Rothbard has gone over this, like, right? Why is Brave search just so terrible? I mean, you'll find it on any other fucking search engine. It's just on fucking Brave browser. I've got Brave search as the default. It's so terrible, and I hate it. But yeah, no, like the dumping coal ash in a river, and we need the government to come in and stop this. Actually, no. You just need proper arbitration, and then it's stopped. You don't get people polluting if you have real free market arbitration. And obviously, back in the day when Murray Rothbard's talking about, like, the little old ladies suing the factories because they dirtied their laundry, that wasn't like really truly free market arbitration. Like, obviously it wasn't like Gustave de Molinari's system of arbitration or anything like that. It was nothing close to what Rothbard would want. But it's still, even as the government was way less involved pertaining to the environment, people were able to sue each other over pollution. You didn't have the EPA coming in there and monopolizing all of it. So again, this is a government problem, and he wants a government solution for it. So it's kind of dishonest to paint this picture of, well, unregulated capitalism, that means everybody's just polluting each other. Well, no, actually, that's not the case. You need the government to come in and say, hey, well, that guy has a pollution license, so we're going to let him keep polluting you, and you can't complain about it. It's only with monopolistic courts that works.
Yeah, exactly. I won't dwell on it because Yaron actually does start getting into how you just use property rights to solve this pollution problem.
You do it. Admittedly, it's a restriction on freedom, formal freedom, but it also yields freedom dividends, obviously. So when we impose restrictions on pollution, we augment the effective freedom to, say, develop in a healthy way without coal ash in your water. Without government, we would have much less effective freedom. I would point out that all property, different point now, we shouldn't fetishize private property or any kind of property from the standpoint of freedom, even formal freedom. All property rights are restrictions on freedom. This is my pen. He can't have it. Okay? This limits what he can do. If he comes and tries to take my pen, which I hope he won't, because
again, this is why freedom is a retarded way to talk about these things. Because yeah, indeed, property rights mean the right to exclude, which is a restriction on other people's freedom to use that thing. But ultimately, like, you've got to have these restrictions because conflicts are a thing. You can't just have total anybody can do whatever they want, because that actually just ends up in the law of the jungle, and people get prevented from doing what they want. It doesn't actually. You can't have that. It's a floating abstraction.
Yeah, so this is where I will give Sam a bit of credit. This is like the kind of strongest point that he's made so far, where he kind of points out that actually Yaron talks freedom, but actually, property rights, which are like kind of the base, or not the base, because he's obviously like, life is the standard or the base of ethics for him. But, property rights are fundamental to his philosophy, and actually private property rights imply a restriction on freedom. So this is kind of a point to him. He does make kind of a good point here, I suppose. So credit where it's due, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
he's bigger than me. The police will come and, well, they probably could theoretically call the police and get them to interfere, right? That's right. That's right. But the point is simple. It's that there's no simple mapping from property rights to freedom, even formal freedom, because all property rights represent interferences with people. Ask yourself how free homeless.
Well, that's kind of, I don't like the way he's phrased that there, but where property rights are interferences with people. It's like, no, actually property rights mean that you are not allowed to start the interference, because, you know, the interference would be when you initiate a conflict. It would be aggression. I'm not interfering with anybody. You know, right now, I've got a lock on my front door. You know, there's clear borders around this house. There's a property right over this house. That doesn't mean that, you know, I'm interfering with anybody. I'm not interfering with anybody. It's just that I'm saying, hey, nobody's allowed to come and interfere with me. So I think he's kind of reversed the order of operations here.
Yeah, exactly. You're not interfering with anyone by asserting property rights.
Homeless people are in our society. They ain't free at all. They aren't free. They don't have formal freedom. If they try to sleep someplace, what's going to happen? The police will evict them. So even from the standpoint of formal freedom, a sort of libertarian capitalism with no safety net at all would be a disaster. But finally, in defining making a moral case for capitalism.
And it's also this notion where he's also twisted formal freedom. He introduced it as a term where it was like being left alone. And, you know, the implication would be, well, so he's meaning like the type of capitalist freedom that Yaron is talking about. But no, now he's talking about like, well, if you have formal freedom, then you have the freedom to just do whatever the hell you want. You have the freedom to just sleep on somebody's property and, you know, not leave other people alone, that is. And it's a problem when the police come and don't leave you alone. It's like, whoa, hold on there, buckaroo. He's just, formal freedom then is the law of the jungle, and effective freedom is the law of the jungle. It's might makes right versus might makes right. This is a really despicable tactic he's pulling here.
Yeah, he makes the distinction and then collapses it like 5 seconds later to, you know, make his point.
You mentioned that that which furthers human life and flourishing are good. Well, I agree. That's a good definition of good. That which promotes flourishing is good. Well, I just am wondering how taxing, say, Bill Gates so that he can't buy a 7th yacht in order to fund, say, you know, vaccines for kids or public education or any of the valuable public purposes that our government serves. How is taxing Bill Gates for that purpose not furthering human life and human flourishing? So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that is the basis of his ethics, and that's fine. He's going to have to make that point. But this is a difficult argument that Yaron's going to have to try and make, is to explicitly link it to the human flourishing. Obviously, Yaron did bring up, like, well, your life is your life, so it's got to be individualistic. So any form of, authority, he was talking about how authority, it's the enemy of your reason, and your reason is the root of your survival. But it's that's slightly more challenging to establish that in a debate. So it'll be interesting to see how Yaron responds to this line of argument.
Yeah, this is just why libertarianism is better. We have a more solid justification because we don't need to appeal to these concepts like human flourishing in order to justify, the libertarian, like our system of property rights. We don't need to appeal to those concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So I submit that even by your own standard, you shouldn't embrace this kind of radical libertarian capitalism. The government does many good things. Maybe I'll stop there. Thank you. That's right.
Yeah, okay, just the ash in the river. Let me just comment on that quickly. I'm sure there'll be environmentalist questions afterwards we can cover. But look, if the river's mine, you ain't dumping your ash in my river. And my definition of capitalism, the rivers are owned by somebody. They're not just out there aimlessly owned by nobody. So you can't dump your coal in my backyard. You can't dump your coal in my river. So the solution to externalities, what we call externalities in economics, is not to is to privatize. Once you privatize, externalities, for the most part, go away. I'm sure there'll be more questions on this. I want to make one crucial point. By the way, I embrace the idea that I'm, what did you call it, extreme? Absolutely, I'm radical. I don't like the word extremism. I don't think it means anything. I'm radical. I believe in this all the way, right? And in its purest form. Wealth is created. Wealth doesn't appear. There is no pie that we then get to divide up among people. Somebody has to create the pie. You create a pie, you create a pie, you create a pie.
Yeah, I mean, Yaron's just kind of running down the list of everything we've been saying, so very, very good from Yaron. I'm liking this.
Yeah, it's a very, very solid, rebuttal so far.
Also, this guy here, is he putting up his fucking hand to ask a question? Like, that's not the part of the fucking debate where you don't get to ask a question yet.
Just midway through the guy's like rebuttal, it's like, excuse me.
I'd like to make a point now. Like, no, that's not how it works. I mean, maybe he was doing something else, but it looks a whole lot like he just put his hand up to ask a question and got disappointed when he couldn't.
It's like the Oxford point of personal privilege. not right now, bro. Later.
You can't then just take, and this is the definition of private property. The pie you created is yours because you created it, because you build it, and you do build it. You made it. You bought it. It is yours. Indeed, private property is not a rejection of freedom. It is a necessary aspect of freedom. There is no freedom without private property, because to live, I need property. Whether I need property in order to grow vegetables so I can eat them, or whether I need property in order to build a machine that I'm going to sell and make a lot of money, or the factory that makes iPhones, or whatever the property is, you cannot have life.
I do like, this is a valid way to attack the kind of formal freedom versus effective freedom point. I would like to, point out, like, well, hey, look, you package these things together, it's all nonsense, that would also be a good attack. But I like this, where he's basically going like, hey, effectively this is a stolen concept fallacy. Like, to have even the idea of freedom, to have freedom in the first place, that depends upon having property. So property couldn't ever abrogate freedom, because freedom, properly understood, you got to be free to do what you want to do, right? But to be free to do what you want to do, you have to be able to have property. So it actually doesn't make sense to use freedom in this law of the jungle sense, where you're free to do what you want to do, where it's just anything you want to do. Because no, that concept, first of all, it depends upon property. So you have to have property first, which limits the scope of what is even possible to call freedom. So this is a good attack.
Yeah, I would say that. It's not the line of argument that either of us would use, but Yaron's been debating, socialists for a long time and using these terms like freedom. So he is good at connecting the concept of freedom to, property rights and his wider philosophy. So, credit to him. He does a good job.
And indeed, life sucks where there's no private property. I mean, life sucks. I really mean sucks. Really, really, really bad. So freedom necessitates private property. You cannot have one another. But let me go back to the pie. So the pie is not a social pie. It's not we created this pie now. We get to decide how to divvy this pie up. No, I created a pie. Keep your hands off my pie. Right? That's capitalism. I want to give out some of the pieces of the pie to some of you. I want to trade my pie for your pie. Fine, as long as it's voluntary. As long as I don't steal your pie. As long as I don't take your pie by force. You can do with your pie anything you want to do, as long as it doesn't violate the rights of other people, as long as it's not using force against others. You have a right to do with your pie what you want to do. Pies are not social, and they're not static. That's the other thing, right? From 300,000 years ago, the beginning of Homo sapiens, I'm willing to accept it. That might be the wrong date, but somewhere a long, long time ago, when Homo sapiens began, until about 250 years ago, everybody on this planet was dirt poor. Was under $3 a day or less. Everybody on the planet was like, a few aristocrats over here who by outstanders were still dirt poor. They didn't have electricity, didn't have running water. And then something miraculous happened. We got a little bit of freedom. Not the full freedom I would like, but just a little bit. About as much as, we've had. And what happened? Wealth creation took off. So then now we can say, there were only 3.5 billion people who were poor. Actually, the number's a lot less. According to the UN, extreme poverty is at the lowest it's ever been in human history. It's down to 8% of the population. Why? Because a few countries in Asia have adopted a little bit of capitalism. Imagine if they've adopted a lot of capitalism. There'd be no extremely poor people on planet Earth. So the only system that has ever brought people out of poverty, is capitalism. And it's done such a spectacular job at doing it that it is striking that every place on the planet that has adopted a little bit of capitalism has shrinking extreme poverty, and every place on the planet that has not adopted capitalism is still extremely poor. Africa is the last continent to struggle with adopting capitalism. Rwanda, Botswana, Namibia are starting to do that. Their GDP is going like this. They've adopted property rights, they've adopted some of the elements of what capitalism looks like, and suddenly they're getting less poor. So if you care about poverty, which I think any human being cares about seeing able people who are poor stay poor, then capitalism is the only solution to solving the problem of poverty that still exists in the world. Thank you.
What if there's a fundamental
Well, teleporting. But yeah, no.
Just
absolutely correct from your own.
Super harsh cut in the stream.
Yeah, absolutely correct from your own. And yeah, Admetos, you're entirely right. It's insane listening to him say all this after the previous debate. Yeah, like he's making good capitalist arguments now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a really, really good rebuttal. I think he does a good job of, obviously he rejected Sam's framing of the issue, and then on top of that pointed out that even if you care deeply about if poverty is your number one issue, we have to reduce poverty at all costs. you should still be a capitalist. You should still believe in private property. So I think he does a good job overall of not only negating Sam's entire position, but also, stepping into it for a second and saying, well, even if I grant it, then I'm still right. So it's a good kind of debate tactic there, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What if there's a fundamental flaw in your premise? Many people here will be familiar with George.
I mean, what if I just hate that framing? What if you're wrong? It's like, well, I might be wrong.
What if you're wrong?
I just hate that so much. What if there's a flaw in your premise? So, well, then there'd be a flaw. Like, what do you want me to say to that?
Jordan Peterson, and he's talked about the dominance hierarchy, and that it's flat out wrong to blame that on capitalism. That the structure of the way we're made, the biology of the way we're made, it's dependent. Like, there's a dominance hierarchy in all social animals. All social species have that.
Thanks for the question. So I think there's a misunderstanding. So I'm not blaming all hierarchy on capitalism, for sure.
I hate when moderators step in and ask questions and then make the most abysmally shitty argument for capital. It's like, well, what if actually we're all supposed to just fit into these like what if class consciousness actually, sorry, not class consciousness. What if class society not only exists but is good? Like, what if Marx was right but that it's good? Okay, no, Yaron would never make this argument, and we'll see that he actually he gets up in a few minutes and just totally rejects the moderator's entire framing of the question. It's just, I just don't like moderate, bro. Just moderate the discussion and make sure no one starts fist fighting the other person. Don't step in and ask all these questions that you have no idea whether the other person would actually ask that question. It's adopting the other person's argument. Don't do that. Just be the moderator.
Yeah, I mean, I am fine with moderator's prerogative when the moderator knows what they're talking about. Gene Epstein does a good job of it. He actually asks pertinent questions. But I'm not liking this line of questioning. This doesn't actually get us anywhere in the debate.
Yeah, what if you were debating Jordan Peterson and not Yaron Brook right now?
Yeah.
There will be hierarchy. There's hierarchy in Norway. There will be hierarchy in Norway even if it moved further left. So there's going to be hierarchy in human relations. Not all hierarchy is problematic. There can be some hierarchies that are great. I mean, I'm the coach of my son's soccer team. That's not problematic, right? They need a hierarchy.
But I mean, this guy is... Why is all hierarchy not problematic? Because his whole argument in the beginning was talking about well, we need equality, and any inequality is bad. And he thought he had established that literally any amount of inequality is bad because it leads to this political power. Well, I mean, do you not have some amount of political power over your son's soccer team then? Is there not some amount of power there? Is there not a power dynamic? Is there not a class difference? So really, if he's being consistent, he should be coming in saying, well, yeah, no, we need to abolish all hierarchy, and then he becomes an ANCOM or something.
Yeah, exactly. He needs to write a 5-volume piece on the problem of hierarchy between soccer coaches and soccer players.
Yeah,
I think that's what he needs to do.
Hierarchy. So the rich. So there are problematic hierarchies when we live in a democracy. That's a fundamental premise. Maybe you guys.
There are problematic hierarchies when we live in a democracy. Couldn't agree more.
What? What?
Don't want to live in a democracy, but I do, and that means political equality.
Well, gee whiz, if he just wants to live in democracy, then this is he's being so politician-y here. He's like, you guys might not want to live in democracy, but I do. It's he pauses for a clap or something. It's this doesn't give you anything in the debate. This gives you nothing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's an applause line. It's the democracy clap, please.
Mm-hmm. It's like the Family Guy bit where what's her name, Lois or whatever. She's like, 9/11 is bad. Yeah.
Or fucking Jeb Bush when he did that applause line at some rally and then no one clapped and he just said, please clap.
And that is fundamentally incompatible with the Koch brothers, for instance, not to pick on them too much, but they make such easy targets, spending, per the New York Times, over $800 million in the 2016 electoral cycle. That's some problematic dominance right there, and that is due to capitalism because...
Why is it problematic dominance? What are they spending this money on? Are they spending this money to make like a robot army, which is going to force old ladies to vote for the Libertarian Party. Like, what is the problematic part of this spending of money? What specifically does he think is problematic about that, other than, well, now they can run ads and convince the stupid people to vote against socialism? Like, come out and say it with your chest, bro. I say it all the time. I say, hey, most people are retarded and I hate them, and they should have no political power. Boom. Like, say it with your chest. It's so much more freeing when you can just say it.
Yeah, right. And again, with the Koch brothers being the only billionaires that exert any political influence in the United States.
In Norway, shifted to the left, nobody has $800 million laying around to spend on an election because you don't have these grotesque excesses of wealth. So
that is like, he's saying this like a positive for Norway. That's terrible. Nobody has $800 million lying around, but they do in the US. Well, gee whiz, it looks like the US is a whole lot more wealthy than Norway. I want to go to the US instead of Norway, right?
Yeah, and also he's wrong. I don't know specifically about Norway, but I know for a fact that a lot of Scandinavian countries actually do have significantly more billionaires per capita than the United States, which is always something like that's funny to bring up when these socialists will talk about the Nordic model. It's like, well, actually, there's way less regulation and there's also more billionaires per capita in some of these countries than there are in America. So, how sure are you that this is the system that you actually want?
yeah, I don't want to oversell socialism. It's not going to be rainbows and unicorns and no hierarchy. There will be all sorts of problems, but we won't have this problem of the rich per se dominating everybody else.
But the rich are part of that dominant hierarchy. So the reason why people work really hard, the reason why they come to school, the reason why they're trying to improve themselves, it's to make a contribution to society. But it's also it's part of this whole biological premise. Like they're peacocking. Part of the intellect is peacocking. Yeah. So when you criticize somebody like, say, what's wrong with taxing Bill Gates? Well, it turns out that Bill Gates employs just tens of millions of people. It's impossible to conceive of how many people Bill Gates, a single person, has affected. It's arguably that he's affected the entire world for the better.
He's like kind of tangential to a good argument here, which is that, Bill Gates, because of mutual profit, he makes wealth by enriching everybody. But he's kind of tying it in with this weird, like, well, because he's just trying to peacock, and we need people to be able to peacock, and then we can get this. It's like, okay, well, I mean, there are other ways to. Sam Arnold can just come in and be like, well, then if that's true, then we just have other ways for people to peacock, which doesn't give them political power, right? Like, this is. So he's taken a good point and tying it into such a weird argument.
Yeah, he seems to think that somehow this analysis of how some people want wealth because of the social status that it gives them, and thinks that that's somehow like a justification for capitalism. And it's like, I always say this to people, like, look, if you start tying in your justification for your worldview into people's innate biological urges, you're going to run into some pretty significant problems very, very quickly when people start, interrogating some other biological urges that people tend to have. It can get very problematic real quick. So I would stray away from that at every possible opportunity.
That's hard to say. Well, why don't we just take away all of his profit? Because some people are corrupt, which I'll get to you. But I mean,
Can I answer this question too?
Sure.
Because I disagree with you too.
Okay. Well.
I want to critique Jordan Peterson.
All right, so I won't go on. What happens if you destroy the very class of people that are producing the means of production? Like you said, they don't just come out of nowhere. It's not just there. It's not a pie that exists and you just seize it and now it's yours. Like, people are producing this.
Yeah. So I take this broadly as an opportunity to talk about incentives to produce under a more egalitarian system. Why would people work if they faced steeper levels of income tax or wealth tax? Well, because they want to be richer than other people, and under socialism, you could still be richer. You wouldn't have the 300-to-1 split between CEO pay and average worker pay. And
I mean, then it's just like an arbitrary line. Like, how much richer am I allowed to be? If I'm not allowed to be 300-to-1 richer, okay, but how much richer, Mr. Socialist? Like, this is the problem with these moderates of any type. It's like, be a radical. It's so much more honest.
Yeah, and also the whole framing of it in terms of envy, it's projection, I think, a little bit. But no, I don't work hard at my job because I want to be richer than other people. I just don't give a shit. I work hard because I want to improve my own lot, because I want to do a good job. I take pride in my work. The whole notion of wanting to be richer than the person working next to me. Like never, like it's never even crossed my mind. Like, gee, I hope I make more money this year than like one of my coworkers or someone at another business. Like I literally could not care less.
Yeah.
Instead, in a lot of like cooperatives, like in the Basque region of Spain, Mondragon cooperatives that are kind of model for a kind of socialist institution, the highest paid employees make, say, 4 times what the lowest paid employees make. And they're perfectly competitive. But put Mondragon aside.
Perfectly competitive. What if I'm 300 times more productive than the lowest employees? How are people going to compete for my labor? It's putting a cap on what I can do. So I should just be way less productive then to actually be making the right amount of money, spend that time elsewhere, go to a different country. So I just reject from an economic perspective that this could possibly be as competitive as a firm. Like there's a reason why CEOs get paid so much. There's a very good reason for it. It's because they're worth it, right? These CEOs, a good CEO makes billions and billions and billions of dollars for their company. Like just an unbelievable. Some of the best CEOs make trillions of dollars for their company. Meanwhile, they're getting paid millions, maybe billions, right? Like CEOs are very, very, very much worth it. And this is why, people are often get upset at charities because they pay their CEOs like, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But it's like, if that CEO worked in the private sector, they could get way more money, actually. So the charities often get a very good deal on their C-suite executives, which are essential to run a business. Like, they are the most productive individuals in that business, which is why they get paid the most.
Yeah, exactly. And I really do hate how socialists will throw out the entire logic of why, like, wage labor is and like the capitalist class is exploitative as soon as, someone starts being a wagey that earns enough. It's like, you're always talking about, the factory workers and the janitors being part of the proletariat, but never like the C-suite employees that are still fundamentally earning a salary rather than like just making profit. You're never talking about the lawyers that haven't made partner in their firm yet, and so they're not profit sharing yet. These people are also somehow part of the capitalist class. So the capitalist class is simultaneously like this fraction of a percentage of the population, but it's also everyone in the C-suite and everyone that earns a decent salary is also now part of the capitalist class. Like, pick one.
It's like you can tell that it's because it's all just based on envy. So if they're envious towards someone, if someone's good, then they hate them because they're good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Just talk about our own country. As I'm sure you both have heard the statistic, but I mean, back the highest level of the top marginal tax rates used to be much, much higher in the 50s and 60s, indeed up to 90%. Was there an economic calamity? Did the dominant peacock say, I'm not going to show my peacock feathers off anymore? No, because it turns out that what human beings really want is to be better than the next guy. It doesn't matter necessarily how much better in absolute terms, or it doesn't matter how much.
I want to make a point real quick on this. So first of all, I mean, again, ridiculous. The idea that humans, what we really want is to be better than the next guy. Like, again, I was speaking from my own personal experience. This is not the case. Like, it's not what motivates me to get up in the morning. It's like, I'm going to be better than the next guy. I just literally never really think about that in anything in terms of that. As far as my day-to-day life, maybe when I'm playing sports, like, I could get competitive and try and beat people, but in general life, like, it just never really factors in. But socialists always bring up like the 1950s and the 60s when the top marginal tax rate was 91%, maybe even 92% at one point. Learn Liberty has a good video about this. It's like 6 minutes long, very, very quick. First point, no one actually paid 90% income tax rate because as you increase the top marginal tax rate, all you do is incentivize people to create carve-outs and exceptions. This person talks a lot about how you get rich people to come in and make public policy to benefit themselves. Well, that's exactly what you're doing when you make a top marginal tax rate 91%. You make it hugely incentivized to bribe politicians to create an exception for you specifically, to the point where I'm pretty sure in that video they point out that the tax code in those years was like 11,000 pages long, and like 10,998 of those pages were all the exceptions that were written into the law in order to allow certain people to be excluded from this top marginal tax rate.
Mhm.
And the second point I'll make about this example is that during this time, America went through 6 separate individual economic recessions. 6 separate, I'm pretty sure it's 6. It's 5 or 6. 5 or 6 separate individual recessions where, people's lives got worse during this time. This was not a time of stability and prosperity for the United States. Since I was born in like the late 90s, there's been like, I'm trying to think, dot-com bubble, GFC, and COVID. I'm pretty sure there's been 3 recessions in like nearly 30 years. And we considered, like, people will talk about how unstable capitalism is when there's been 3 recessions, and one of them was due to a massive exogenous shock in the form of COVID. During like this decade, maybe a decade and a half period of like 92% income tax rate, there was like 5 or 6 recessions where people, life got measurably worse over a significant period of time. So it's not a good example to bring up, because again, people weren't taxed at this rate. You can look at tax receipts as a percentage of GDP. It stays pretty much exactly the same at around 17 to 18% across the entire history of the United States, regardless of what the top marginal income tax rate was. And the second point is, it actually wasn't really a good time for prosperity in the United States. There was a lot of recessions. There's a lot of ups and downs in the economy because of this and other factors that were going into it at the time.
Yeah.
Much in absolute terms they have. It doesn't matter to Bill Gates whether he has $15 trillion in his bank account or $1 billion. He just wants to have more than Mark Zuckerberg. And you can have relative inequality under socialism. We're just not going to have this ridiculous absolute inequality where you've got people with trillions, billions of dollars and people starving in the streets. So the big picture point then is socialism is perfectly compatible with allowing some inequality for the sake of incentives.
So I hate this dominance theory. I think it's awful and terrible, and it justifies the worst kind of elements that would be critiqued against, that exist within society. Because it says that we're basically just regular animals. Some of us have this dominance thing, and we're willing to step on other lobsters to get to the top, and to hell with those other lobsters, and it's a zero-sum world, and we're going to destroy the competition in order to get to the top, and it's all about relative. I want to be better than the other guy. I think all of that is bullshit. I don't think any of that is true. We're not lobsters. We're human beings. And as human beings, we have the capacity to reason. We have the capacity to create stuff that doesn't exist before. We don't become wealthy at other people's expense like lobsters do. We actually create wealth that benefits everybody else around us, because they all get to trade with us. So we don't rise to the top by stepping on other people like the lobster example, and we're not programmed to step on other lobsters and other human beings to advance. We're not motivated. I don't believe for one iota Bill Gates looks at the top 400 wealthy and figures out where he is relative and motivated by getting higher up on the top of the list. None of these guys are motivated by that. If you know billionaires, what they're motivated by is the love of producing, the love of creating something, the love of making something beautiful. Yeah, he didn't create the iPhone, which is somewhere over there, because he wanted to be richer than somebody else. He created the iPhone because he was inspired by something beautiful that could change his life and our life. And trade for that. And yes, he wanted to make a lot of money, but the measure of money is not relative to other people. The measure of money is how much did I impact the world. Money is a symbol for how much value I've created. Because how do you become a billionaire? How do you become a billionaire? We talk about this abstraction of people having billions. But how did Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Bezos, these guys become billionaires? By trading with us. Did we win or lose from that trade? Well, why did we enter it? Why did we buy the iPhone? Why do we use Amazon? Because we believe that it makes our lives better. So we enter the trade because we believe we're going to make our lives better. So the only way for them to become billionaires is for millions, no, not millions, billions of us, to trade with them in a way that we believe will make our lives better. So the only way for Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and these guys to become billionaires in a free market, we'll talk about the corrupt ones in a minute, I guess, is by making the world a better place for everybody else. By applying their own mind to a problem that exists out there, a problem of human survival, a problem of human production, and coming up with the best idea, and then trading with other people, making their lives better in win-win relationships, in trader relationships, voluntary relationships, not relationships that are imposed, not relationship that is zero-sum relationship, not lobster-like relationships. Human beings are different. We're not predetermined by genetics to invent iPhones. It doesn't work that way. There's no way that we're predetermined to invent iPhones. You have to make choices. You have to use your reason. You actually have to think to come up with an iPhone or any product that's out there. We don't, even this building. Animals don't do this. They can't. Right? So billionaires become billionaires by making the world a better place. They do it by creating wealth, not by taking wealth. And the fact that 26 people are richer than 3.5 billion is because 26 people have objectively created more wealth than 3.5 billion, because the fact is the 3.5 billion are barely surviving. All they're doing is they're farming and they're eating what they produce. And I bet you the net worth, by the way, in this room, I'm probably richer than all of you combined, or at least the students combined. I'll take out the adults, because your net worth is negative, because you've got student loans. It doesn't mean I'm rich. It just means I have a positive net worth. So 26 people actually...
Crazy flag. I just love the... by the way, I'm probably richer than all of you combined, so... I understand the point he's making, but no, it's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like, we didn't really pause, or you didn't really pause there at all, because, you know, everything he's saying is obviously correct. Yeah, like, the fundamental point to drive home when you're in the realm of economics is that it's not a zero-sum game. That, you know, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and whoever else, they're not competing for the same set amount of wealth and trying to get their share of it. They're just creating more wealth for other people to then use, and that's how they're getting richer. There's not a fixed pie that's then divvied out, fairly or unfairly.
Yeah.
Created a lot of wealth. 3.5 billion. Sadly, haven't created the wealth yet. If they lived under capitalism, they wouldn't be that poor.
We all know there are people, say for example, the Wells Fargo crisis. It's just absolutely appalling. And when you look it up, they knew exactly what they were doing. And so, they were targeting people, they couldn't speak the language. They were targeting people that were the elderly. These are the people, what is Wells Fargo? Like number 4, number 3 of the biggest banks. So, and they, in order to drive, so we have this system of capitalism that incentivizes growth. So in order to fake their profits, because, they have to show the people that want security for their stocks to rise up, they are faking sales.
Let me just, because you've mentioned Koch twice, let me just say that the Diamond Institute does get a little bit of money for the Koch brothers, so just for they pretty much give everybody who's in the free market world some money, so just for full disclosure. How do you protect against corruption? That's the only reason to have a government. It's to catch the crooks, right? That's the one thing the government should do. So if there's real fraud, then catch the real fraudsters. But the problem is today that that's not what the primary job of government is. So everybody remember Bernie Madoff? I know you guys are too young maybe, but Bernie Madoff, big pyramid scheme.
I mean, absolutely. Like, I think this question, it just also, I mean, it's a fine enough question, but I mean, Yaron's already made the point, like, hey, I am opposed to the current US. I don't consider the US to be any sort of capitalist country. So Yaron can just say, well, yeah, obviously that's why Wells Fargo was able to do these things, because it's not capitalism. It's not under objective law. They're able to be bailed out. They're too big to fail. None of that exists under actual capitalism. So then this question doesn't necessarily do much, but I mean, I appreciate that the moderator isn't debating Yaron, so maybe that's not the idea here. So Yaron has will have a good counter to this.
Yeah, and for sure, and he has also stipulated at the start, since the outset, that he's obviously not an anarchist. So yeah, he's just going to say, look, I think that the proper role of government is to catch crooks. Like he doesn't have to present what we would present, which is the how you resolve these things without the state. He can just appeal to the state because he thinks the state can justifiably stop these things from happening. So it's a very easy argument for him to kind of sidestep.
He basically stole $63 billion from his friends and family members. Did the SEC catch him? SEC, responsible for protecting us from fraud in the securities market. Did they catch him? No. They got a report twice from a hedge fund that said, this guy's a crook. Here's what he's doing. And they couldn't catch him. They couldn't get him. Why? Why couldn't the SEC get him? Because the fact is the SEC is not about catching crooks. The SEC is about monitoring my behavior. I'm not a crook, just so full disclosure. I happen to be in the financial business as a business on the side, and I do some buying and selling. But the SEC monitors everything I do. I have to file a 13D and a 13G and a 13 this and then they send in their inspectors to I have a whole compliance office. I have a whole thing of compliance where they come in and look at my books. They're so busy monitoring what I'm doing that who has time to catch crooks? And they almost never catch crooks. It's rare that they actually file. Usually, who catches the crooks? The market does.
And this is like almost a very anarchist point, where it's like, well, the government coming in here to try and do this, well, this big federal agency, it's bloated, it's terrible, it doesn't work. What does work is the market. The market is able to catch the crooks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always, this point has been made numerous times. The companies like Enron, like these, fraudulent businesses that, lie about what they're doing or inflate the value of their assets that they own, they get caught out by the short sellers, the people who are selling against the value of their stock. That's how this stuff gets caught out. It's not by the SEC. The SEC, as Yaron points out, the SEC is concerned with regulating you and I's day-to-day lives and, ensuring that we file, we give the busybodies over at their offices work to do by filing all their bullshit forms. Right? They're not interested in catching Enron or, as you said, Bernie Madoff. They're interested in all that bullshit. The real crooks like Enron that are lying about what they're doing, they get caught out by the short sellers who sell against the value of their stock, who investigate the underlying value, the underlying business practices, and see the inconsistencies, and then bet their own money against them and get proven correct.
And that's the great thing about it is the profit is built in there. So there's an actual incentive for people to short these bogus stocks. There's an incentive to properly deal with it, whereas the SEC, what incentive do they have? It's a monopoly. It doesn't matter.
Well, this is ironically also exactly why rogue like insurance agencies under a free market system of law wouldn't be incentivized to do what Yaron says they would do, and start enforcing like aggressive just like again protecting like aggressive clients and whatnot, because it's an unpredictable and unprofitable manner of doing business, and their investors would quickly depart because there's going to be no certainty about their ability to do what they're paid to do.
Yeah, and obviously all of the subscribers to this insurance firm, they're also gonna peel away because, well, hey, this insurance firm it probably doesn't have enough money to pay me off if I need to call in on my insurance. So these firms, they just die by market mechanisms. But obviously, the big capitalists at the Ayn Rand Institute, they don't recognize this when it comes to specifically the area of security.
Yeah, exactly. They 100%.
In the case of Bernie Madoff, who caught him? Well, the hedge fund guy who wrote the memos twice, and who landed up at the end catching him? His son. His son called in the police. So, if the government actually did its job, its one job, which is to protect us from crooks and criminals and fraudsters, the world would be different. And just to relate to the Wells Fargo example, in capitalism, there are no bailouts. By definition, capitalism is anti-bailouts. There's no too big to fail in capitalism. I go further. There's no deposit insurance in capitalism. Yet why do people keep their deposits in Wells Fargo in spite of the fact that they committed fraud? Because who cares? If something really bad happens to Wells Fargo, the government's going to step in and pay me back, right? Unless you've got more than $250,000. Who's got more than $250,000 in the bank account? Like, okay, one guy, right? That's pretty amazing, right? Right? They're trying to protect a little guy with deposit insurance. Really, how many little guys have $250,000 in their bank account? So the whole system is corrupt. The whole mechanism of the world in which we live in today is corrupt. Not corrupted by capitalism, corrupted by statism. As soon as you have deposit insurance, now you have to have the regulations to monitor the banks. And then if a bank is very big, it has systemic risk, so we have to bail you out. So by the way, if you have more than $250,000 in your bank account, here's a tip for those wealthy students among you. If you have more than $250,000 in a bank, always put it in a too big to fail bank. So Wells Fargo is a good place for $250,000. Bank of America is a good place. Don't put it in your local community bank, because when it fails, you won't get your money. You'll get everything up to $250, but not above. But if Wells Fargo fails, they'll bail them out. They told us they'll bail them out. It's in the, so what, you talk about incentives. When you tell somebody, when you make money, you get to keep it all, but when you lose it, we'll bail you out. What kind of behavior do you expect to get? Pretty nutty behavior, right? And that's what we get. So that's not capitalism. There's no bailouts in capitalism. There's none of this stuff in capitalism. Capitalism is a system where the government does one thing. It protects us from the crooks. And if only we had a little bit of that. One of these days we'll have to debate Jordan Peterson.
And we're seeing the strength of Yaron's argument, what I alluded to before, where it's not, you're not fighting with one hand tied behind your back when you take a principled radical stance. You are actually enabling yourself to make these principled arguments. Because again, if this was Destiny, if this was Sargon of Akkad, they'd have to justify why actually bailouts were necessary, why actually, the banks needed to do all this stuff because of, too big to fail, and it would have been so bad if, all these people lost their money. Yaron can just reject that entirely, reject the entire premise of the argument, and point to a more just system. So again, principles are a strength, not a weakness, and this is something that I wish more people, people like Dave Smith, for instance, I wish more people realize that your principles are a strength of your position, not something to be like afraid of, or that hamstring you when you try and make an argument. They're your strength. They're your greatest weapon in an argument, is your principles. Yeah,
because ultimately, like, if you're not making a principled argument, you've already put yourself on the back foot. You've already made it such that, well, I don't actually believe in what I'm saying. It is really just from a strategy perspective, just a terrible, bad idea. Don't do it. You need to, really, if you're, like, say, a libertarian, if you're an unprincipled libertarian, if you're a pragmatist, well, what you're saying is, well, I don't actually agree with libertarianism. Because what is the libertarian movement? It is the radicals. They're the ones who do the moving. They're the ones who are the basis of what makes up libertarianism. If you reject sort of libertarianism, then you're not moving libertarianism at all. You're not part of the movement. It's the radicals who are the movement. And people really need to understand this. So both from like a political strategy perspective, and a debate strategy perspective. And just, if you want to be truthful, you've got to be a radical.
Peterson, because
So in the pocket of America where there's extreme inequality and poverty, many of the victims of the lifestyle live on the government's welfare policy. And in a purely capitalist society, what safety net exists where people are able to improve their own quality of life, where there's such like where there's other inequalities such as like education, access to jobs, things like that.
so first, I don't buy that inequality.
I mean, like, I'm not sure, again, like, these questions are kind of, bad, I think is a good word for it, because, well, because he just, like, Yaron Brook's already said, like, he wants radical capitalism, that he doesn't want the government involved in the economy at all, that nowhere in the US is there actual capitalism. And then the question is like, well, you know, there's people who are living on welfare, and there's so many inequalities there. So what about that? It's like, okay, well, reject the premise that inequality is a bad thing, and reject that there should be welfare.
And a huge part of his argument is that, like, people, the well-being and living standards of people would just completely explode if we were to, you know, unleash free market capitalism on the world. Like, you know, so many people get stuck in this like framework of like, you know, well, what would happen, you know, if we were to institute, you know, Yaron Brook's minimalist state overnight? What would we do for the next you know, 3 months to all the people who suddenly lost their social safety net? Well, like, Yaron's point is that forget about 3 months. In 3 years, none of that shit's going to matter, because these people are going to be so much more ridiculously better off that you're going to be, you know, going to look back and think, why did I ever care about that stuff? Why did I ever care about, you know, that living standard? These people will be so much more wealthy, and or not just wealthy, so much just more better off if we were to just unleash the free market and let people, you know, do their thing.
Yeah.
Inequality is a problem, you know, in capitalism, right? So there's inequality, but I don't think it's a problem. As Sam said, I'm going to say I don't care about inequality, and I don't. So I care about poverty. I don't care about inequality. So what happens to poor people under capitalism? One of the amazing things, if you look at free economies, again, to the extent that they're free, relative to what we have today, which I think is a lack of freedom, but to the extent that they're free, is that two things happen. One, capitalism tends to produce more jobs than there are people. So you get massive immigrations into capitalist countries because there's so many jobs being created. So poor people can get jobs. The unemployment rates under capitalism, and again, the closer you get to true free markets, the more this happens, that unemployment rates are basically approach zero. Second, because of the investment in capital, the productivity of labor goes up dramatically. So wages go up. So people become less poor, not because of a handout. People become less poor because they're becoming more productive, and therefore they're rising up. You know, you can see this in 19th century America. You can see this in 19th century England. You can see this in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's a brilliant example, because 75 years ago there was nothing there. There was a fishing village. 7.5 million people live there. Why? Because people went on rafts to get there. No safety net, nothing guaranteed except their freedom. Freedom of contract, not even voting, so not even democracy as we understand it. Property rights and contract law respected. People went there, created their businesses, built wealth, and built a life for themselves. So that is the way.
I would say, you know, I'm not sure what Yaron's stance is on democracy, but he's kind of like tangential to the point, like, oh my god, and they didn't even get democracy. Even still, they were able to do all. It's like, it's because they didn't get democracy that they were able to do all that. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, he pretty much just made the point that I said he should make, which is that, like, in a couple of years, you're going to look back and think, why did I ever really concern myself with exactly how much redistribution we need to do to make people's lives better? They're just going to be so much more better off because of, you know, the fact that more jobs are being created and the greater productivity of labor.
yeah.
Poverty gets eliminated, right? Now, you might ask, well, what about the people who can't, right? There's a certain percentage of the population, I think it's well less than 1%, but there's a certain percentage of the population, they got into an accident, they you know, something happened, and they can't take care of themselves. What happens to them in my ideal capitalist economy? People help them voluntarily. So those people are dependent on other people one way or the other. And the question is that dependency going to translate into a legal claim against me? Is that dependency a moral claim against me? If you're suffering, if you got into an accident and you're suffering, does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, again, I like this sort of tactic, because ultimately somebody has to pay for these people to, you know, make their way. It's either they're going to pay for it themselves, or somebody else pays for it. And, you know, if somebody else is paying for it, should it be voluntary based on, well, I like this guy, I think he's good, so I want to keep him alive, or is it somehow a claim against the productive in society, which is the pardon me, which is the altruist answer, but that's based on hatred of the good for being the good. It's, you don't deserve what you produced because you produced it. I do deserve what you produced because I didn't produce it. And that is a complete inversion of the correct way to think about these things. Obviously, objectivists, they have very good answers to this type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick tangent. I want to shout out Capitalist Pig in the chat who said Yaron Brook is 2 steps away from being a Hoppian. If you can sit through Lex Friedman, which I know is really, really difficult because the dude is just like unbelievably boring, but if you can sit through like his podcast with Yaron and with Michael Malice, Malice at one point says to Yaron, because they're getting into like an anarchist versus like, you know, objectivist, like minarchist state debate. And Malice says, you know, there's this fictional society with like a, you know, exclusive private covenant, you know, private law, private dispute resolution. It's called Galt's Gulch. It's called the hypothetical society that Ayn Rand wrote about as, you know, as the ideal society in many senses of the word. Like, forget, you know, being 2 steps from a Hoppian. Yaron would advocate for Hoppianism in any other term. He just doesn't like Hopper because like Hopper's a rationalist, and I get that. But if you just described a Hoppian covenant community to him in a vacuum, he'd be like, hell yeah, like that's Galt's Gulch. That is, you know, based as fuck. So he's a Hoppian in name only, I'd like to call him.
Well, Hoppian in everything but name, surely.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, other way around. My bad.
Oh, pardon me.
Mean I am obliged morally or politically to help you? And my answer is no. Not morally. I don't owe my life to you just because you're suffering, and certainly not politically. So the question is how you convince me voluntarily to help you. And of course, the people closest to you are most likely to help you, and the people further away are less likely to help you. But one of the things that happens in a free capitalist society is you get civil institutions, voluntary institutions, not coercive institutions, that help out people who cannot help themselves. So charity is the main form that takes. There's all kinds of other mechanisms.
Real quick, sorry. Because I know that what a lot of leftists will say, because, you know, Yaron makes a point like, well, you know, if you are genuinely disabled and unable to look after yourself, then you should rely on the people around you, like your friends and family and stuff. And it's like the socialists will then come back with, well, what if you have no friends and family that are willing to help you? And I'm like, well, hang on, I'm supposed to feel sorry for someone who like can't help themselves and then has alienated everyone else that's close to them in their life. And then I'm supposed to step in as a stranger and be forced to help them out? Like, you know, like what? Like, why are we supposed to feel sorry for people who are both unable to help themselves and also such garbage people that everyone else that actually knows them in their life has turned away from them?
Yeah.
Of mutual aid societies, unemployment, private unemployment insurance. There's even insurance against poverty in some capitalist countries in the past, or semi-capitalist countries. You know, insurance against poverty that you could buy, you know, to protect you from those kind of accidents and things like that. In other words, you're still dependent on other people, but now you have to ask for the help instead of demand the help, which is the system we live under today. Today, if you have a need, you can use the force of government, guns, in order to take my money and get help. I think, again, I'm against force. I'm against coercion. I'm against authority.
Maybe I'll say something about the same too. That's a great question, I think. Let me just say something about poverty again. It's striking that the only countries that have really eliminated poverty are probably some of the countries you like least. So again, the Nordic model, Scandinavia. There basically is no poverty.
Again, Yaron already made the argument, like, hey, the only way that you get rid of poverty is by having capitalism. To the extent that you have capitalism, there is no poverty. To the extent that there is statism, socialism, there is poverty. That causes people to be poor. So, just vaguely gesturing at, well, the Nordic model, that doesn't actually establish anything he needs. He needs to say, well, actually, no. I get that for 300,000 years, I think it was that Yaron said. I get that for 300,000 years, people were dirt poor. And then the second that freedom started to be introduced, everybody became super wealthy. But actually, that's false for reasons X, Y, Z. We used to be way richer, or whatever. Maybe he thinks like Agartha is real or something, you know. But that's the tack he has to go down, right? He has to go down. You're wrong that capitalism creates wealth. You can't just say, well, the only people who have eliminated poverty are the Nordic model, because it's like Yaron's already established the point that, hey, there is no capitalist place on earth. So you can't appeal to, well, the Nordic model is doing better than other non-capitalist areas. They're all not capitalist.
Also, the Nordic model that he would also, if he was in charge, radically change.
Yeah.
Like, he literally started the debate by saying, yeah, like, I like the Nordic model, but I would also completely restructure it in a very significant way if I was in charge. So, like, you can't really appeal to a system that you don't advocate for. That's the point number one. Point number two, I just don't think that socialists a lot of the time understand that, you know, things can exist, you know, people can be wealthy in spite of factors. Like, you know, not every single like factor or, you know, a situation or, you know, a state of affairs in a society is helping produce wealth if there's wealth. You know, there can be factors that are you know, that the wealth exists in spite of. You know, they seem to understand this very well when, you know, you point out that every single country on the planet that's ever been and ever will be wealthy is capitalist, and they can say, well, you know, the wealth exists in spite of capitalism. But then as soon as you might say, well, you know, the people of Scandinavia aren't poor in spite of the welfare state, suddenly they can't understand that argument. It's you know, disingenuous, I would say.
In those countries, they're not very capitalist. I think of these things on a spectrum. So you might as well actually, no, you don't, because you only define capitalism as that one extreme end. But really, there's a spectrum. And the question is, to what degree is society in control of the economy? The more the answer is yes, the more socialist it is. Norway is quite socialist in that sense. Society exerts a lot of control through its very democratic state over the economy. And one of the things it does with that control is it taxes a lot, and then it redistributes that wealth to do a lot of useful things among them.
I mean, I think it's also Norway. He specifically is calling out Norway here. Might the massive amount of oil wells just off the coast of Norway, might that have somewhat of an impact on the wealth of Norway?
Yeah, Yaron actually does make this point later on. He says that it's unfair to use Norway because they're just a massive, like, yeah, oil state that like has a significant amount of natural resources to its advantage.
Basically eliminating poverty. So the answer to your question in the American context is, we need to have more social spending. We need to have more taxation. We need to do more to help people. For instance, I'll just end with this. Here's one thing we could do. We could have a universal basic income that would literally eliminate poverty overnight. We could literally just give every American $15,000.
Would that eliminate poverty overnight? Through what means? Through destroying the wealth of the wealthy, who are the ones creating prosperity? Like, in what way is taking from the wealthy, punishing the wealthy for being wealthy, punishing the productive for their production, how is that going to lead to more production? Because ultimately that's what you need. You need more production to make sure that people aren't poor. Right? That's the cause of prosperity.
Yeah, exactly.
You're looking for prosperity. That logically requires production. So punishing production, damaging production, it's a hard case to make that is going to somehow make more production.
Yeah, so this is a key point. And the way I would put it is that a universal basic income simultaneously undermines the incentives to be productive, because you don't need to be productive to, you know, acquire the resources necessary to live, because they're just given to you, while simultaneously demanding greater productivity because you're now putting a much greater strain on the welfare state in order to support everyone, not just, you know, the small fraction of people that are really, really poor. So yeah, you're pulling the demands of the economy and what people are willing to provide the economy in opposite directions, and expecting that somehow that's going to work, and it just won't. And to another point, he says that we should give each American $15,000 and that would solve poverty. Well, if you really look into it, like, American welfare spending would be close to $15,000 per capita as we currently sit. Um, and yet he claims that we're nowhere near solving poverty, that poverty is still like a massive problem. Like he says that like 100 million Americans are or live near poverty. And it's like, dude, like, at best, your policy, let's say you did UBI and nothing else, your policy actually in this scenario wouldn't be adding all that much to the amount that is spent on welfare, and yet somehow you think that's going to completely solve the problem that you're identifying.
Yeah, because I mean, fundamentally, like, why would spreading out the welfare to everybody, when it's currently focused on the poorest, and that's apparently not enough, why would spreading it out suddenly be enough?
Yeah, exactly. It's the UBI is so stupid because it's actually like intentionally the purpose behind it is to make the relief less targeted towards the people that need it. Like even if you grant for the sake of argument that, we need to use welfare spending to, help people, it's like, well, why would you waste so much of this welfare that you have access to on people who are already working and don't need it? It's a very, very bad argument.
Yeah.
dollars a year, divide it by if you want, and bam, poverty's gone.
I have a question.
I mean, I think, you've watched this. Are there any like highlight questions which are particularly good? Because I've been particularly impressed with these questions so far.
Let scroll down. On the like the timestamps and stuff that they have further down. There's a couple of like good sections. I think it'd be good to like see when Yaron starts talking about Scandinavia. So I think that seems to be like about 108. I think that is. So I think that's a good kind of point to where we can maybe jump in and see what he has to say.
Sure.
Oh, you want to do Scandinavia? So I actually spoke at the University of Bergen a few years ago and gave a talk on the evils of the Scandinavian welfare state. It didn't go too well in Bergen, Norway, but it was a lot of fun and there was a lot of engagement and a lot of interaction. I mean, I'm not going to use Norway as an example because Norway's slightly cheating because they have oil and give them credit. They've managed that oil reserve in ways that other countries have not. They've done a very good job of managing that oil and the money that's coming in, and that's a big product of why Norway is significantly richer, for example, than Sweden and Denmark. But I spent a lot of time in Sweden and Denmark. I give a lot of lectures there, and I don't see this what do you call it, the utopia that is Sweden. So let me give you a quick history of Sweden, and I'm sure people will challenge this, but my version of a quick history of Sweden that I think aligns with reality. Before 1870, Sweden was the poorest country in Europe. Many of the Swedish immigrants that came to populate the United States left Sweden during that late part of the 19th century because it was so poor. And it was poor because there were no property rights. It was still basically remnants of feudalism in Sweden. In 1870, Sweden did what many other countries have done, which is adopted the basic elements that move you towards capitalism. Again, not pure capitalism, but as close as people have come. From 1870 to about 1950, Sweden was the freest economy in Europe, the most capitalist economy in Europe, actually one of the most capitalist economies in the entire world, and indeed rose and became on a per capita GDP basis the richest country in Europe.
I mean, this all makes sense. I mean, obviously, seeing he's not like a historian, this is like his take on the history of Sweden, but it makes sense because you need to have some relatively capitalist period to do the production, to make the wealth, which can then be predated upon by the socialists. You can't be a socialist from day one.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll make this point now. It's pretty much what you were saying, but slightly more long-winded. But yeah, what socialists do every single time is they basically they look back at history and they watch it progress, and they watch, the last, 200 years or so of people becoming, incredibly wealthy relative to what they were throughout most of the rest of, or all of the rest of history. And then they stand at the top and they're like, socialism is the credit for this. It's like, we started introducing socialism in the last 30 years, and that's the reason why, these countries are successful. It's like, well, what about like the 300,000 years of history? What could we maybe glean from the thousands of years of history before this, and especially the last brief period of time where we had a little bit of freedom and all this wealth was created? Maybe we could take some lessons from that and not just be like totally stuck in this exact moment and trying to, analyze why, like retroactively, all these policies that exist now are responsible for all the wealth that was created before those policies ever came into existence.
Yeah, well, what they did was they consulted Dave Smith, and he said that retroactive slavery is possible. So they figured that, well, socialism is slavery, so we retroactively enslaved everybody, and that's what created the wealth in the past. So it all makes sense, you see.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweden had many of the large industries. It was an incredible, successful, prosperous country. From about 1960 to 1994, Sweden decided that they were going to redistribute that wealth. They were going to adopt socialism. They were going to nationalize certain parts of their industries, and they did all that, and they became poor. By 1994, they were bankrupt. By 1994, nobody would buy their bonds. They were basically Greece of today. In 1979, the most money-making industry in Sweden...
Oh, who was that?
79,
Dude in the back, it came in fast.
The most money-making industry in Sweden was ABBA. Remember ABBA? most money-making industry in Sweden, because they'd lost all their industries. They'd lost their edge. They'd lost their success. A lot of the successful Swedes, like Yaron Brook, the tennis player, the second biggest income producer in 1979 in Sweden, left so that they wouldn't have to pay the high taxes in Sweden. He moved to Monaco for a while. In 1994, they were bankrupt. And since 1994 to today, most of the governments in Sweden have been right-of-center governments. All of the governments in Sweden have actually done something that is unthinkable in the United States. Unthinkable by Republicans, never mind Democrats. They cut government spending. They actually reduced government spending. There is no deficit in Sweden anymore. They run a balanced budget. But by the way, they do that while having a significantly less progressive income tax than we do. The rich pay a lot less in comparison. So in Sweden, everybody pays taxes, not just the very rich. In the United States, we have a very progressive tax system.
Yeah, just real quick, this is an important point. Because again, like another point against like the leftists like AOC and that will use the Nordic model as an example for what they want. Yeah, these countries do not have progressive income tax systems. It's not the rich that pay their fair share. It's not we don't tax the rich they don't tax the rich in Sweden or Norway or Finland or in Scandinavia in general. They tax absolutely everyone. Like you can't. There's this populist movement where it's like, we just need to tax the billionaires and then we can be like Sweden. It's like, actually no. Becoming Sweden requires taxing everyone at 60%, not just the ultra wealthy.
Yeah.
They've cut spending. They've shrunk the welfare state. And most importantly is they've reduced regulation on business. Indeed, in many respects, in spite of the large unions in Scandinavia, it's easier to fire an employee in Denmark than it is in the United States, or in Sweden than it is in the United States. Mobility of labor laws are far more rigid in California than they are in Scandinavia. It's easier to start a bank in Scandinavia than it is to start a bank in the United States. In many respects, if you look at the economic freedom indexes, Sweden and Denmark are right up there with the United States. They're not that different than the United States. Indeed, when Bernie Sanders said that his ideal of socialism was Denmark, the Danish prime minister came out and said, wait a minute, we're not socialists. We're not a socialist country. And if you go to Denmark, you don't see socialism. You see, yes, more redistribution of wealth in the United States, but less business regulation. So they've come up with a different mixture in the mixed economy, right? We have a mixture. We redistribute relatively little, but we regulate a lot. They redistribute a lot and regulate less. Both are way below what they could be. And let me just end with this. I recently read a study that shows that Danes in America, immigrants that came to America, now there's a selection bias here, but Danes who came to America are significantly wealthier than Danes who stayed in Denmark. They're just as happy, because the Danes are supposed to be the happiest people in the world. Danes in America are just as happy, and Danes in Denmark, and Danes and Swedes and Norwegians in America live just as long in terms of life expectancy as they do in Scandinavia. So once you control for those genetic aspects of health, they're not any better over there than they are here, and happiness is probably more of a cultural thing than it is something that we know how to measure in any kind of truthful.
So this is.
Yeah, I mean that was all very good. I like, he's clearly very knowledgeable on the topic. So, because obviously these like the Nordic model, he's obviously bringing this up. But like you see this from socialists all the goddamn time, where they're talking about the Nordic model. So, being able to on your feet debunk why how the Nordic model isn't actually their perfect socialism, how to the extent that how it is capitalist to a certain extent. And that's why it's so, that's why they have the wealth. That's very useful.
Yeah, for sure. Unless if you've got a specific point that you want to go to, there's a point where they start talking about labor unions, and Yaron kind of like defends labor unions slightly, and I wanted to jump in on that. I think there's actually a specific timestamp for it down the bottom where they reference like Yaron talking about labor unions.
Sure, and we'll have that as the last point.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, it's like literally right at the end, so that's actually a good way to finish.
Not opposed to unions, not pro-unions. Okay, let's see.
I mean, I'll just say, I obviously, I'm not opposed to unions. What I'm opposed to is a special power union has in a sense of, and I forget the name of the bill that was passed in the 30s that gives them a huge...
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely correct. Just right off the bat. If people, obviously, if you have a right to quit, that doesn't change just because a bunch of other people are quitting as well at the same time. So that's the basis of unions. But people then say, well, that's what unions are, and that's what currently unions are. But no, currently unions have like so many protections, and that's why unions are like the biggest grower in state power ever, because they have all these protections. They're like a big mob, and they just get a big voting block together, and then they just keep adding more and more regulations. We want to make it harder and harder to fire people, our union employees, make it harder to fire them, make it so that they get more money, and it just strangles capitalism completely. If they had none of these special protections from the government, then you know, if there was a union forming, I could just fire everybody who's thinking of joining in the union and hire scabs, right? I wouldn't have to deal with it. But it's because they have all these protections. I'm not able to do that. I'm not able to freely interact with the union employees as a capitalist.
Right, exactly. And what I would say to people is basically, look, take every argument that socialists will use as to why cartels are bad, like cartelization in business is bad, and apply those to unions, and that's what you get. Like unions are just cartels for labor for that specific aspect. So cartels are the subsidization of the inferior users of capital. You got land, labor, and capital. The cartels are that area for capital, and unions are that for labor. They're the equivalents. They subsidize the shitty workers that don't know what they're doing, the low productivity workers at the expense of the higher productivity workers that will do what they can do for a lower wage. That's exactly what they are. And the only reason that's the socialists have no principled objection to cartels, because they'll apply the exact same logic to unions. They won't apply the exact same logic to unions, and they'll defend unions because they're pro-labor. Allegedly they're pro-labor. They're not really pro-labor, because as soon as you're a laborer that's not a member of the union, you're the one that's going to get beaten up and called a scab and picketed and abused and potentially murdered because you just wanted to go to work and make a living for yourself.
Yeah.
Huge amount of power vis-a-vis employers. I mean, unions should be able to negotiate, but employers should be able to fire anybody who strikes, for example. There should be no special government privileges one way or the other. As to, look, there's no question that Europe is more egalitarian, more flat in terms of income inequality than the United States is. The United States has more income inequality, but the fact is also that we're much richer than Europe. If you take some of the richest countries in Europe and you place them on a scale, adjusting for cost of living, you place them on the scale of the United States, they turn out to be slightly richer than Mississippi, but not much richer, nowhere near even the average. With the exception, I think, of Ireland, which is actually the freest country today in Europe, and Switzerland, which happen to be the two countries that are wealthier on a per capita GDP than the United States, and where unions...
200 rupees from Man Sharma. Thank you very much. If you're in the US, you're going to be much richer than in Europe. The only counter people have is healthcare. But the problem there is that the US healthcare is too statist, as you show in your earlier video. Yeah, exactly. Like, America is just unbelievably more wealthy than anywhere in Europe.
Union rates are very low. Union rates are not high in Switzerland and they're not high in Ireland. But
real quick. Yaron actually makes this point in the video at some point. He says, look, if you take pretty much any country in Europe and made it the 51st state, it would be probably a similar wealth to Mississippi, with Mississippi being one of the poorest US states. Like pretty much every European country, if you put it up against the GDP per capita of like the 50 US states, ranks somewhere from like 45th down to like, below 50. Like none of these countries are actually really that wealthy. And if you actually go there, and go beyond like living in like the resorts and living in the nice touristy parts of a lot of these European countries, you actually see that, like this is the case, that like these countries aren't as wealthy as like Americans who've never been there pretend they are.
Yeah.
But if I had a model and I wanted to say, I want to be like that country in Europe, I wouldn't use Sweden and Denmark, and I would use Ireland. Ireland is significantly richer than Scandinavia. Ireland has a dynamic economy, a growing economy, and is doing, and they've even gone to what I guess people consider the left on social issues, which I think is great. So they've legalized abortion and they've legalized gay marriage for a Catholic country. That's pretty cool. So, I consider Ireland much more of a model within Europe, and in Ireland, the unionization rates are not that much higher, if at all, than the United States. One of the reasons union rates have gone down is because they're not needed as much in a tech-oriented economy. They're not needed as much when individual productivity can be measured at a much better rate than it used to be. It's true that when everybody was doing the same job and you couldn't actually tell who was a better worker and who was not, then there was power in grouping together and negotiating as a group. But when you're actually the more productive person on the line and you can show it because now everything is measured and everything is monitored, then you don't want to be in the union. You actually want to negotiate a better salary because you're being more productive. You don't want to be driven down. At the end of the day, what drives wages up is productivity. Unions could drive wages up artificially, but that does not help anybody in the long run. In the long run, you cannot make more money than you actually produce. Thank you, guys.
I mean, absolutely true, and I will say I think Yaron did pretty well in this debate. I think he, obviously, Mr. Sam Arnold didn't really have a philosophical or moral justification for his system, so Yaron was able to just kind of cakewalk and get right through. I didn't pick up on any single area where Sam Arnold was able to flow through and establish a point that Yaron had no counter to.
Yeah, no, 100%. We did miss the part where Sam Arnold starts advocating for state mandated gooning. I sent you that like 11-second
Yeah.
clip where he, out of context, he starts advocating for state subsidized gooning. So, I mean, point to Sam on that one, I suppose. But no, other than that, he doesn't make too many like substantial points that really need to be addressed all that deeply, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I will say thank you very much for coming on again. And thank you everybody who stopped by and chat, and especially to the people who donated money. It wouldn't be possible without you guys. So thank you very much to everybody.
Yeah, and especially like huge thank you to EvoCap for keeping the chat lively. He's always a valued contributor to the chat. He keeps things going.
Indeed. All right. I'll see you.